Morning. Good morning to all, and good afternoon to some. We're so excited to have you back for our second day of the Human Trafficking Workshop, Trapped in Transit, sponsored by Wellesley Center for Women and the University Consortium for Liberia here in Atlanta, Georgia. We also want to say a very special thanks to our panelists for coming back. Some of you are coming back today as new panelists. Some are coming back, joining us from yesterday's workshop as participants. We had a very lively and robust discussion yesterday on human trafficking. Some very exciting speakers participated from both the travel and tourism side of the industry, the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and other stakeholders and partners. Please let me welcome you again to our second day of the Human Trafficking Workshop. My name is Cynthia Blandford. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the Honorary Consul, Republic of Liberia here in Atlanta, Georgia, appointed by Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf in 2009. And I'm now working with the new administration of His Excellency, President George Manneh Weah. I also serve as president and board chair of the University Consortium for Liberia, one of the stakeholders and partners in this human trafficking grant, along with Wellesley Center for Women. I serve as the president and board chair, and I'm excited that many of our board members have joined us today, including Dr. Cheryl Dozier, President Emeritus from Savannah State University, and others who may be on the webinar as well. So if you're following today's agenda, we do have a couple of adjustments. For those of you in Monrovia, you are aware that this is campaign season. And so as such, we were hoping that the Vice President, Her Excellency Jewel Howard Taylor, could join us to make remarks. She's in Bond County, so we're trying to get an understanding on whether or not she might be able to join us by phone or by some other measure during her visit in Bond County. If by chance she is able to join us, we will bring her in and make an interruption in the program. So please be on standby for that as well. The session for today, if you've got your agenda in front of you, I will be making official welcome, which I'm doing right now. I will also then introduce to you, please, Mr. Martin Hayes, who is the acting managing director of the Liberian Airport Authority. I will do that shortly. In session 2, which is our transportation partner presentation, we're very delighted that SM Brussels is going to bring remarks, Mr. Jory Hendricks. He will have a wonderful presentation on security, protection, etc., the emergency response discussion from the SM Brussels side. Then we'll have a short break at about 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our session 3 will be civil society change agents. We do know that unfortunately Deborah Richardson is not going to be able to join us, but we have also some delightful speakers, delightful speaker who will take her place at the top of the hour. For our session 4, trafficking research experts and group discussion, we have Laura Newman, Director, Rule of Law at the Carter Center. She will also bring her perspective, along with Lenny Benson, Distinguished Chair in Immigration and Human Rights Law from New York Law School. And then toward the end of the day, we'll also have His Excellency George S.W. Patton Sr., the Liberian Ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C., and then we'll have closing remarks and wrap up and next steps. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking forward to your participation today. We also want to encourage you to participate in the chat box with your notes and comments. There's also a Q&A session. Put your comments in there as well. We'd like to have a lively discussion, hear from you, get your thoughts and views and any concerns that you have. This activity, this particular workshop is being recorded for future use and training. So for those who are not able to participate today, we will be sure to share this information with our stakeholders and partners moving forward. So again, we want to say a special thanks to the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia for their sponsorship and funding of this grant, and to our stakeholders and partners. Let us begin. I'm hoping, Mr. Hayes, we're getting ready to get started. I sent you a note. I hope that you're ready, because we are ready to get started as well. Mr. Hayes, are you with us? Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Hayes?
Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry. Mr. Hayes has sent a message that I don't know if he's on right now. I'm not sure. Let's see, is he?
I know he sent a note that he had an urgent early morning meeting, but he might join us. So if he's not available, I know we have a very, we have a good, I guess we have another expert coming in to give us some comments and feedback. So Laylee, maybe we'll get to Mr. Hayes when his meeting is over. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think he's here just yet. So I'm going to turn it over to Laylee. I think she has a surprise guest for us this morning.
Well, I do. Thank you very much, Honorable Blandford, for opening this morning's meeting, day 2 of our workshop. If your experience was anything like mine, yesterday was a fast-moving train filled with valuable information that all of us who care about trafficking will be able to use. So I'm thankful for those of you who are again returning today. And I also want to say welcome to those of you who are here for the first time today. As you know, the Wellesley Centers for Women, which is a women and gender focused research institute located at Wellesley College, which is a premier college for women in the greater Boston area in the United States. The Wellesley Centers for Women is a women and gender focused research institute that is collaborating on this effort to address the challenges of trafficking in Liberia. Those challenges include the sex trafficking, child trafficking, labor trafficking, and other forms of trafficking, all of which we care about and all of which we want to address. At the Wellesley Centers for Women, we are very honored to have a number of visiting scholars who bring their expertise. Often these are people who are luminaries in the world and want to spend a few years working on academic pursuits under our roof. So I would like to introduce one such person to you now, and that is Advocate Hawa Ibrahim. Hawa Ibrahim, JD, SJD, ML, is a highly awarded international human rights and Sharia law attorney with considerable academic and government experience, who is currently researching multidisciplinary and collaborative explorations of root causes of terrorism, including radicalization of youth, and building bridges of cooperation between religious and non-religious communities, with a strong focus on the role of women and gender in all of these processes. Counselor Ibrahim previously hosted 2 international working conferences called Mothers Without Borders, Steering Youth Away from Violent Extremism, at Radcliffe College of Harvard University, that brought together thinkers, advocates, activists, students, and dignitaries to address this highly consequential topic. Counselor Ibrahim is the president of the Peace Institute. She has over 15 years experience in human rights law. The founder and senior partner of the Aries law firm based in Abuja, she was personally responsible for saving 40 women sentenced to death by stoning. She's the author of Practicing Sharia Law, 7 Strategies for Achieving Justice in Sharia Courts, and also the Guide to Achieving Human Rights Objectives under Sharia Law for Judges and Attorneys in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. She also played a role in the freeing of the schoolgirls who were abducted by Boko Haram in Nigeria, and she has served on numerous presidential commissions in Nigeria. She has been an envoy for the UN and received awards from the EU, where she is a frequent speaker. She is a member of the Council of Human Rights of the International Bar Association. She's a visiting professor at the University of Rome and a much sought after speaker on human rights, especially related to gender, justice, and interfaith dialogue. So we are very proud to claim her as a visiting scholar at the Wellesley Centers for Women. And when I explained to her this morning that one of our speakers wasn't able to make it, she was willing to jump up and come share with us some of her reflections about problems relating to trafficking in Nigeria and in West Africa more generally. So Hawa, I'd like to welcome you.
Thank you so much. That is very kind and very generous introduction. Thank you for having me. What a pleasure. Laylee has said my work, but I will just focus this morning on discussing part of the conversation I had about trafficking, specifically when it comes to children. And I will focus a little bit on my work with the girls that were kidnapped by Boko Haram, and maybe on a broader scale, some of the work I did in Rome, in Italy, generally speaking, specifically in Rome with respect to trafficking of women and girls in the southern part of Nigeria into Italy. Now, I want to say three things just for us to interrogate a little bit more in the conversation. I don't know how the format is, whether there'll be Q&A, but I'll be focused more on trying to speak to what you want to know or what you want to hear. So I'll just make some few remarks, and hopefully by questions, I'll be able to answer a little bit more. And the first something I wanted to say is difference and reputation. In some of this issue of trafficking, especially when it comes to Boko Haram, and on a larger scale in the southern part of the country, is this issue of the difference between them and the reputation of that difference. My work with the girls that were initially kidnapped in 2014 in Chibok, the schoolgirls, it's a known thing globally, but two things that I found interesting is that archives we have locally has the ability to address some of these issues. However, we need some international collaboration to be able to address them on a bigger scale. Now, what is it that the archives, what are the archives we have locally, and what are some of these things we could emphasize and sort of enforce in our localities? I'll mention a few things that we did that was very helpful, is to understand the dynamic of the people and to understand and work within those parameters of those dynamics. Now, the moment you start going out, it could not bring as quick a result as possible. Now, speaking about dynamic, we had countries, about half a dozen countries that gave Nigeria drones, and they also gave us expertise to help in identifying where the girls that were kidnapped were, and ultimately were trafficked by some of the members of the Boko Haram. During those times, we would sit down on the round table. I was part of a presidential committee appointed by the president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, to help with the effort to rescue the girls. During those moments, we would sit down on a round table with the expert that came from those countries that gave us drone to analyze the drone capacity, what they are being able to get. And they would tell us, because we didn't make the drone, so they give us all the information. Something was not right inside of me. So right inside, I was thinking about what else could be an added value to this conversation. And something was a missing link. And while chewing over it, I felt I wanted to speak to the chairman of the Presidential Commission, who was General Sabu. And I told him I really wanted to see the leaders of the Boko Haram. So I'm just specific on what I was able to do with my local resources. And I was able to, through persistent, I was able to be allowed to go back to the maximum prison with the help of other officers to visit with leaders of Boko Haram that were arrested and kidnapped arrested and in the prison. Now, through conversation, I was able to understand from their first information report and from the officers that have arrested them who their parents were. And that is actually the beginning of Mothers Without Borders. And through their parent, we were able to go to through the first information report, we were able to get to their villages to speak to some of the parents and bring the parent to the prisons. And subsequently, through the conversation with the parent, we're able to understand a little bit more on how we could rescue the other girls from where they were. And that has to do with a local initiative within the prison and within the police and within the hunters and within the fishermen in the villages. And so these are things that from a distance, we don't see their values. But if we understand within some local parameters, there could be ways to address these issues with our archives that we have and we could use and utilize to be able to get some result. Moving forward, and I'll ask for Q&A because I want to be more specific. I'm talking now generally speaking. We were able, through this intervention, the earlier intervention we did with going to visit the mothers, using the soft powers of the mothers to be able to understand from their children who are in detention, some of the leaders, get some more ideas on how to go and rescue others. We rescued over 50 girls. But I want to say the bigger issue in this issue of trafficking of girls and kidnapping with respect to Boko Haram has to do with the situation of so much youth. And from the statistic, we understand over 70% of youth under the age of 25, actually between 25 and 35 in the northern part of Nigeria are not employed. And because they are not employed, they are exposed to antisocial behaviors, and part of it has been emphasized by religion and indoctrination. And partly that is how we have come out with some of the difficult situation we have with Boko Haram and the persistent kidnapping of girls and children, and now even older people. So unless we address from a bigger angle globally, this issue, globally, yes, but also within the country, the issue of employment of youth and bringing women and mothers on the table to be able to find solution on a longer term, I think our progress will be slow and will be touted by the lack of inclusiveness of the soft power of the mother. And lastly, I will say a little bit of thing about my work with the trafficking in Italy. In Italy, the situation is totally different. And Luca, who is a veteran reporter, and I had worked on issues of trafficking. And I started this working of trafficking because I myself had been arrested at the airport and kept in detention for about 6 hours. I was a lawyer, I'm still a lawyer, and I took issues with it. And that was when I married my husband in 1993. And so that was my interest then to go into understanding this issue of trafficking. Over the couple of decades, the Italian government has relied on some of the work I have done and has invited me several, especially the foreign ministry, to address this issue of trafficking of girls. There are many levels to that, and I'm not sure this is the right time to sort of put so much on you. Actually, in Q&A, if you want specific, I'm happy to speak to it. But 3 things I would say with respect to trafficking of on a global stage of the Nigerian girls into Italy and into prostitution. The first is that it's sort of like a mafia operation. So it has nexus in different corners. So it's not easy to put your fingers on it to want to stop it per se, because there are some bigger forces behind it. So it's beyond a local initiative of getting the girls. But of course, the second one, there's local initiative. During my investigation back in Nigeria, I understood that part of the difficulties is also that some religious organizations are part of those girls coming to help them get work in Italy. And I'm sure you know all the other stories of how it goes about. So addressing it from interfaith, from religious perspective could be another way of looking at how to slow down this trafficking on another scale. So beyond pointing fingers, and that is why I want to end, beyond just pointing fingers, beyond suggesting the secrecy of it, I think there must be a sort of some transparent, it's an open-ended question as to how to get it done. And I want to say that how to should be inclusive of what we have as an archive and some sort of things that we've been doing that has worked for us in the past. It's an open-ended question. And I would invite, if there is a moment for people that have 1 or 2 questions, I can address it specifically. But I will end by saying it goes back to what I said earlier about the issue of difference and repetition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hawa. Those were some really powerful remarks, particularly given that you gave us the honor of showing up within an hour of the time that I asked you. But I knew the power of the stories that you had to tell, because obviously we've talked about many of these things before. And I want to reiterate some of the most important points that you made, because I think they're really germane to this conversation, and they connect to some of the points that were made yesterday by some of the speakers. One of the things that I really love that you emphasized is how addressing trafficking has to be a collaboration between the local and the global, because while there are very local specific aspects of the problem and aspects of the solution, importantly, you also have to think about larger global forces that are shaping the local environment and making trafficking even come into being. So, I think one of the things that we really tried to emphasize yesterday, although we didn't get as much into it then as we are right now, is the importance of thinking about trafficking within culturally specific context. There can't be a one size fits all. Even though we can learn from, for example, the ways it's dealt with in the United States, we can't necessarily use all of the United States strategies and solutions in the West African context. One of the things about the West African context that you brought up that I really hope everybody took home as a point is the importance of mothers in problem solving. The fact that the light bulb went off for you, and we said, if we go talk to the mothers of these guys who kidnapped these girls, then we're going to have a different angle for solving the problem than we will have from some of the other strategies. Obviously, the drones were important. They helped you search the forest, but you knew to also go ask the hunters and the fishermen who knew that forest like the back of their hand to help you look. And so those kind of solutions are very local, but they're also very culturally specific. And they remind us how important it is to honor local knowledge, honor local genius, honor local skill, and to bring everyone to the table. Even people that on the surface might not seem like they're going to be experts actually are often the ones who hold the key. I think also the point that you made about thinking about the situation of youth around the world. We know that in Africa, there is what is sometimes called a youth bulge, but that's actually becoming a factor all over the world. We do have more youth proportionally in the population right now than we've had at pretty much any other time in history. And we have the concern about what these youth are doing. Are they being adequately educated? Do they have employment? Are they in a position to have a strong network of family relationships, friend relationships, and what kind of guidance are they getting about how to live life? Those things also influence whether trafficking is going to emerge and what the resources are going to be to deal with that. So I appreciate you for bringing all of those things to our attention. It's interesting because when my student assistants were doing research related to trafficking in West Africa in preparation for this event, one of the interesting things that they found in one of the research articles is that geography actually does play a role in trafficking. And you mentioned the situation of the forest. We know that the girls were hidden in the forest in northern Nigeria, but dense forests as well as long coastlines have been found to be associated with trafficking in other areas where people can surreptitiously carry people without being discovered plays a role in trafficking. So we have to think about where are those areas where unobserved movement of people is possible and figure that into our strategies about how we address trafficking. So it was very interesting to me that you brought that up. I'm wondering whether anyone in the audience or amongst the other panelists has any questions for Hawa, because she is an incredible resource and I know that she can't stay with us for the full day. So if anyone has a question that they would like to ask her, you can either put it in the Q&A box or you can raise your hand and be recognized. So, and Cynthia, you too may have thoughts or questions in response to Hawa's presentation.
Thank you, Layli. I just want to say a special thank you to Ms. Ibrahim for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. Across the world, we have watched the issue take fold in Nigeria, and your leadership has just been outstanding. And so some of the lessons learned, I know that this was a short notice for you, but I'm certain that under Laylee's leadership, we'll have another opportunity to hear from you and to look at some other best practices to ensure all, of our, unfortunately, our emerging economies, some of our frail and fragile countries are also, perhaps vulnerable to these kinds of things even happening in countries like Liberia and other places. So we do want to learn from you and understand these issues so that we can prepare ourselves, for anything that might be coming our way. We understand that the issues are tough and difficult, but I think it's better for us to be prepared in the event that some unfortunate situation happens. So it's almost like you see something, say something. This is now be prepared if anything might come our way. So I do appreciate your leadership because this is information sharing. I don't think if we had not had you on today, many of us may not have thought about Boko Haram and how it impacts young women and girls and the threat for these young women and girls and how that whole issue of security and safety, how do we then, understand it and then be prepared for these issues that may come forward. We pray not, but it's better to be prepared than not. Thank you so much for your leadership in this space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I think that it's also important to note that in this particular instance, we probably focused more on the abduction and the kidnapping aspects of what happened to the Chibok schoolgirls, but we have to also think about how places where child marriage is normalized is associated with trafficking, because to take a girl away for a child marriage is a form of trafficking. So we have to realize that working on child marriage as an issue is also a way to help end trafficking. All right, I understand that we have a question from the Carter Center. So I'm wondering if our Carter Center guests could be spotlighted to ask their question. I know that they have to be given the ability to unmute. So we'll hear from them as soon as we're able to put them on spotlight.
Eric? Eric?
They can chat now. They just have to unmute themselves.
Okay. Laura, if you can unmute yourself, you're given access. There you are. Go ahead.
It's actually not me. It's the team in Monrovia, where we have some incredible civil society leaders joining us. So they've unmuted themselves.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead. Please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Yes, I'm Attorney Joseph Cheeseman from the Carter Center.
Welcome.
Liberia, thanks for your splendid brief information. My question is, you talked about the involvement of the mothers in your attempt to rescue the girls. How much impact did the mothers make in your attempt to rescue these girls?
So I will try to answer you by giving you an exact example of what we did. So I was appointed in this presidential panel by the former president, and I was appointed as one of 27 members. Now, I'm here in Boston, and I was invited, I was at Harvard. So I guess that itself carries with it some kind of place in the society in terms of the fact that I was independent. I didn't lobby to get appointed. So it means I have a total independence in what I wanted to do on the panel. We were there in the commission, we were there for about 8 months. And so that independence was important. And I want to say this, and I don't know from which angle you are working, but even we do human rights work or any other work, that level of independence is extremely necessary so that we can think re-strategize as much as we can. So that was for me a good freedom to enter. I didn't have anything around me. And so when I felt that there was need for us to look beyond what we are doing on a daily basis, understanding what the drone information is, giving us information, the Interpol telling us a lot of issues. And I was like, it's fabulous. But in my intuition, there was something right in my guts that was not right. I didn't just there's something that was going on. And so it was at that moment I approached the chair. And when I spoke to him, he was like, he doesn't think it's a good idea for me to go back to the prison. We have already seen the inmates and we should be done by it. He doesn't really think it's a good idea. I insisted, and at some point he was like, okay, if you want to do this, I will not be responsible because it's not part of our terms of reference. So it was based on that I decided to bulge out, and I'm not suggesting we should do this. I have a crazy life, and so don't take it that literally to do what I have done. So be within your comfort level. So I was, before then, I was a prosecutor in the Ministry of Justice for 8 years. But before I was a prosecutor, I was a police officer. And so in the police, I had colleagues. When I went to police college, I had colleagues that now have commissioner in the state that we were doing this case. So it was easy for me to pick my phone and call my colleague and say, I need a cover. I want to do this. I want to do that. So with the help of these colleagues I have in the state of Borno, and also my mother is from that state, I was able to go back to the prison. And as a prosecutor, I know that we will have any person that comes to any detention facility will have an information, and we call it FIR, First Information Report. So it was through those first information report that I gathered some information about those inmates. I didn't see the inmate, I just gathered information based on the FIR. And it was based on those information, I decided that I wanted to go to the villages and speak with the mothers. I just want to do it. It wasn't convenient because there was a lot of risk attached to it. And the process, I won't go into it, but we went to the village. Now, Lily spoke about understanding global things from a local lens. And when you get to the village, I'm sure in Liberia, you may have experienced some of it, it's important to deal with the structure of the village. And part of the structure of this village is the chief, his council. And so you don't just pop into a village and appear to want to help them. They know what their helps, they know where it is itching them. So it's good for us to understand that they know better than we do and follow the protocols. So that's what I did. I went to the village head. We came, of course, with the security people who respected their protocol. We were introduced to the mothers. So we met about 4 of them. We met more, but we brought 4 with us, and I'll speak about the 4. So those 4 mothers that we met, we had a conversation with them, like the normal conversation for the most part, without raising any issue with respect to children that were missing. So in the conversation about family and who I am, what I'm doing, I hadn't introduced myself properly. They didn't tell you. I became educated myself by accident. I became a lawyer by accident. I came to teach at Harvard by accident. So I knew where I'm coming from. I came from a very remote village. So I could relate very exactly to the villages I was. It's easier for me to relate. And so we would sit and talk normal, talking about family. And it turns out that they are the one that suggested that their children have died because they have not seen the children in years. And at this moment, it was about 3 years or so. So subsequently, we were able to see how we could speak to them to come with us to the town for 2 days. So the city is Maiduguri, and the villages are somewhere remote part of the state, about 3-4 hours. They came with us, they stayed with me in a hotel. The following day, we went to the prison. They didn't know where we were going to. We went to the prison. We are in the 2IC, this officer, second officer in command office. The men usually sit on the chair and we women sit on the floor on the mat. So we were sitting, and then I have already arranged that one of the leaders should come. Now you have to understand, maybe you understand it better from Liberia. When a young man is aged, when he's about 10 or so, they will tell you, now you are going to be the man of the family, you are going to take over so you don't hug women. So that's part of the thing we have there. So this young man that came out from his prison room, locked up, and he was approaching the 2IC office with an officer. About some feet away, he noticed somebody that looks like his mother. Now he must be about 25, 28. He rushed to this lady. He fell on her and he hugged her. He hugged her so tightly and he started just crying and weeping. And there was shock because the mother didn't know that her son was alive. This whole situation was unfolding and she was crying and we all joined in the cry. And she said 3 words, just 3 words, Meya Faru in Hausa. In essence, is what went so wrong. And that is when this young man decided to start just speaking. He just spoke. Now, in this detention, he had been tortured. In some of our camps, in some of our police detention, you know what torture means. When you talk about Guantanamo Bay or Abu Ghraib is something else, but some of our torture could be terrible. So he had been tortured, this young man. He has not said a word. When the mother asked him, Meya Faru, what went so wrong? He just burst, and everybody was looking for their tape recorder or their phone to record what he was saying. And from there, we got some substantial information. And I said earlier, and Lady said it even better, that there is that soft power that is beyond the power of the drone, that is beyond the power of the Apache helicopters and the tanks that we could employ. And I guess that 3 words was the game changer. And for me, this is where the power of the mother lies. And I'm working on the phenomenology of the soft power of mothers. I have written an article on it, and I'm hoping to discuss it in due course. But I could see in every single step that we move, either we are talking about trafficking, we are talking about illegal child marriage, which I'm a victim. There is something about that soft power of mothers that if we bring it to the table, it could play a massive role to shift dynamics. And I hope that beyond our conversation here, that we look at those corners where those soft power exist and we employ them so that we can live a world better than we find it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hawa. That was a very powerful answer to that question. But again, I hope that it's really driving home in everyone's minds that as we work on trafficking in Liberia, there's a host of resources that we may not have brought to bear on the issue. And, you know, no matter what people engage in life, they still love their mothers and their mothers still love them. And recognizing that that's a power for social change is what your story has brought to light. So thank you so much for sharing those details. That's incredibly powerful. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask Hawa before she departs this morning?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, Hawa, you're free to stay for the entire workshop, but I know you have other plans. So any other questions?
Yeah.
I hear someone maybe coming forward.
Yeah.
Go ahead, introduce yourself, please, and ask your question.
Where I'm Hello. Go ahead.
Hi, we're having a hard time hearing you. Could you get a little bit closer to your microphone?
Now, actually, happy to be a part of this great presentation.
Is there another person coming forward from the Carter Center gathering?
We We can't hear. Can you repeat what was being asked?
I was asking whether there's another person coming forward to ask a question from the Carter Center group. I heard some murmur, but I couldn't tell.
All right.
I believe there is. Let's-
Okay, thank you. Yes, sure. The person can come forward, introduce themselves and ask their question. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm. My concern is what?
For some reason, we're unable to hear you. I'm sorry. Is it possible to type your question into the Q&A box?
So apologies, we have a lot of people in our offices to hear this important workshop. Sa, can you repeat the question? We can't hear you. But it sounds, we can hear you, but we
Okay.
can hear the question.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
You hear me?
yes.
Okay, so I was asking the team to speak, but speak louder and get to the point.
Okay. You need to stay very close to the microphone. So we can only hear you if you stay close. So once again, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Yes, you need to stay very close to the microphone next to that computer. No, we're not getting you. Colleagues,
Hello?
yes, you have to stay very, very close to the microphone. Do not move from where you are.
Well, my question is the motivation. I want to know what motivated her having gotten the appointment by the president to see how best she can work alongside all of the officials to making sure that they rescue those girls that was being kidnapped. How did she gain her motivation to do such work?
My motivation has to do with my upbringing. I was saying that I grew up in a very small village. Maybe in Liberia, you may have people that hawk, they put things in their head and they sell. So I sold everything that was sellable. I sold from vegetables to the pap that you sell, to fruits. Anything that is sellable, I sold. So that was where I came from. I was a seller I was hawking things, buying and selling. By the age of 10, I was giving out in marriage. So when you talk about girls' marriage, like I said, I was also like a victim. So my background itself spells out my motivation. And I have always thought about giving back what I was given. I wasn't allowed to go, I was supposed to go to school, so I ran away to go to school. So there are many layers that keep peeling as I move on in life, and then ended up to teach at Harvard was like a cherry on the ice, on the cake. And over all these years, it's always been how I will give back. So whatever our motivation is, and I don't know what you are working on, we find something. And it's, for me, I think it's at times necessary to leave it better than we find it, wherever we find ourselves. So my motivation is driven inside. I don't take money. When I was doing those cases, I don't take funding because it was a big issue, especially my earlier cases, saving women lives that have been sentenced to stone by death, stoned to death by stoning. It's necessary to know what dynamic you work in. And my book, The 7th Strategy on How to Practice in Sharia Court, I sort of interrogated the question as what is our dynamic and how do we work within our dynamic? What is our focus and how do we stay focused? How do we look at things from a global angle, but yet try to see how we can interpret it within our local circumstances? How do we always have a plan, a backup, a fallback, an exit strategy? So these are some of the things that I try to imbibe in my work. And I refuse to get engaged with, you don't pull me into your issues. And we always have so much around to do. We can only do as much. And if we refuse to join issues with people that have issues also, and we focus on our issues, it helps us. So the ability overall to pay attention to detail, but yet stay focused. I remember during some of our cases, I was asked, what do you think about West versus Islam? Or what do you think about clash of civilization? This was not the issue I was working on. This was not my issue. I'm not there to discuss about West versus Islam, the clash of civilization. I had a woman sentenced to death by stoning and I want to save her life. That was my focus. That was my issue. That is where I want to address what I want to address. So the ability for us as we look at motivation to also see our situation and to work within those local dynamics, I think will also be helpful. But let me end by also problematizing the problem by saying that things have shifted from 10, 15, 20 years ago when I did the work I did and now, and the work we are continuing. Now we have the social media. And I'm sure as you address this issue of trafficking, one of the things I'm positive, I have not seen the agenda. Like Layli said, I just came in 30 minutes before I was told 30 minutes, I just jumped into this conversation. So I have not seen anything yet that you have done. But looking at the artificial intelligence, the algorithm, the social media, in order to redefine the knowledge without borders is extremely important. Whatever we are going to do will be determined by a lot of information that goes around us. And so the ability for us to think 2 steps ahead of some of this gadget we hold. Why will my camera has 3, my phone has 3 cameras? What surveillance am I under? What information, what data has been extracted? How can we translate that into our work on a daily basis and make sure that we are 1 step ahead? How can we not be the problem of our own problems? And I think a bigger picture, I'll just throw it out there. It's just something for us to chew through as the day continues. I actually am on my way to Rome. I have a flight in about 2 hours. I have to be at the airport in about 2 hours. My flight is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to continue the conversation on a different level. And I hope that beyond the color of our skins, beyond our orientation, either male or female, whether we are poor or rich, beyond all our things that drag us, there is a powerful force that unites us. And that is our human dignity. That is our humanity. And every work we do goes around that dignity. As long as we live, we have the strength to do it. We should not waver and we should move on. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Layli, for having me on. And it's just a pleasure to share some thoughts and to also be blessed by your presence. Thank you so much. Shalom.
Thank you. Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you, Hawa. We've truly been blessed by your presence. And I know that you're, in the larger scheme of things, a partner in this work with us and us with you. So thank you. And we wish you the best on your flights today. Understand that you need to go. And we will catch up again when you come back. Thank you so much for being part of this program today. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Cynthia. I know that, that you'd like to make an acknowledgement of LAA, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Layli, and I appreciate so much the speaker who had to leave, but we learned so much from her. At this time, I know Mr. Hayes had an urgent meeting. I see he has joined us as a presenter. Mr. Hayes, are you still available or are you still tied up in a meeting? We'd love to hear from you. If not, we'll move on to our next speaker. Mr. Martin Hayes with LIA. I know that we have a group in Monrovia at the Liberian Airport Authority who are participating in the workshop. But I do know that Mr. Hayes, the acting managing director, has been called into a meeting. Mr. Hayes, are you available? If not,
yes.
Good afternoon.
Hello?
Good afternoon. So we're hearing an echo. We'd very much like to hear from you, and I'd like to introduce you if you are prepared to make remarks. Are you prepared today? And I can go ahead and introduce you. Thank you. I will be happy to introduce you. And please check your mic. We're still hearing a little bit of an echo.
All right. I'm in an environment where we processing the training with the Liberian Airport Authority and a team that part of the training. And in this environment, there is an air cool in the environment. I'm sorry for the interference of that.
Oh, it's much better.
Everything is going fine here.
Very fine, sir. Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce you and then we'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much. Mr. Martin Hayes is Acting Managing Director. Oh, thank you, sir. I'm going to introduce you now. Mr. Martin J. Hayes is Acting Managing Director and Deputy Managing Director for Administration for the Liberian Airport Authority, or LAA, in Robertsfield, Liberia, where he has served since 2018 in this leadership role. Mr. Hayes is a graduate of AME Zion University in Liberia with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. He holds an advanced certificate in capacity building of exporting characteristic consumer goods for African countries from the Academy for International Business Officials of the Ministry of Commerce, People's Republic of China. Through his strategic leadership and strong organizational management, as well as his crisis management competency and effective team leadership, LAA has implemented increased security and information management for a more positive traveler experience. And for those of you who are not with us yesterday, just to let you know that Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport and LAA have signed a sister airport agreement, and this human trafficking workshop is consistent with the policy and opportunities that we have put forward in the vision in our strategic relationship. At this time, please help me welcome Mr. Hayes. It's over to you, Mr. Hayes. Thank you. Go ahead, please. Mr. Hayes? You're on mute. Uh-oh. Mr. Hayes, can you hear us? You're on mute. We can't hear you. There you are.
Okay.
Thank you. Over to you now.
All right, that's good. Thank you for the introduction. At the Rabat International Airport and the Liberia Airport Authority, things are working fine when it comes to the security issue of human trafficking. We try to put everything in tight in order to observe the rules to protect the issues of human trafficking at the Rabat International Airport, where we know that human trafficking is an issue that is a global issue that takes place around the world. So for this manner and for this cause, and the Rabat International Airport, and in collaboration with the Liberia Airport Authority, put every rules in place in order to manage the human trafficking in the Republic of Liberia. At our border point, we have a security system put into place that manage the issues of human trafficking. We work along with the immigration section, where they're responsible for tracking issues when it comes to traveling out of the country, and that of And the security apparatus, we have a group of security apparatus that try to work along with teams in order to have the blocks of human trafficking and the rights and respecting the right of people at our airport. But we could go duty into our process, but there's a little issue that we have for today that I'm having a meeting, but I just try to slink in to see that this process go through. So I'm trying to make it very short in order for us to have this meeting while my team will be listening, because we have a tight schedule for today, many meetings that we have in our ballroom.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hayes. And we clearly understand the opportunities and the challenge that you're facing today. We welcome your leadership team at LAA. And just to inform you that Layli and I will actually be in Monrovia in December the 12th or 13th. And we'd like to schedule some time to do a focus group, a more hands-on focus group with your team. And I will be coordinating that with you and Human Resources, so we can get on the ground to have a little bit more interaction and engagement with your staff. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, you're highly welcome at the time you'll be coming. You're highly welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes, and thank you for your leadership in this effort. Wishing you all the very best for the day.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. So ladies and gentlemen, we're looking forward to the opportunity of working with LAA in the very near future, and we'll certainly keep you informed as a part of our final report out that will be presented to the embassy in January of 2022. So if you're looking at the agenda, I think we'll go ahead and move forward. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, for your brief remarks. At this time, we're going to be focused on session 2, transportation partner presentation and group discussion. Please let me take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Jory Hendricks from Brussels Airlines. Brussels Airlines has been a long-standing airline partner supporting Liberia's travel and tourism industry before Liberia's civil conflict, post-conflict, during Ebola, post-Ebola, pre-COVID, and post-COVID. SM Brussels, as a strategic partner, continues to show their commitment to Liberia, and we appreciate their ongoing leadership and support. Today, I'm pleased to introduce to you a new friend, Mr. Jory Hendricks from SM Brussels Corporate. After studies in human science and modern languages, Mr. Hendricks started his career in aviation in 2002, in the domain of security. He started working for Brussels Airlines in 2006 as a security officer. He became a security crisis and emergency response manager in 2013, responsible for planning and review of procedures in the fields of aviation security, company and cargo security, training, audits, fraud, immigration, emergency response, and business continuity. In March of 2021, he was appointed as head of security, crisis and emergency response. Working for Brussels Airlines gave him the unique opportunity to get to know some of the most beautiful places on earth, and very specifically on the African continent. His very first visit in sub-Saharan Africa was to Liberia, and he has since told me that ever since he has felt a deep connection to this beautiful country of Liberia and the potential that it has to offer. Ladies and gentlemen, please let me offer to you to make remarks and to provide a presentation, Mr. Jory Hendricks. Jory, over to you.
Well, thank you very, very much for this very nice introduction. Didn't see that one coming, but it was really, really nice to hear this. And actually, I want to thank you to give me the opportunity to talk to all of you, and especially those who are currently in Liberia. And let's hope that this virtual meeting might end up in a real one day, or a real workshop with all here present, and that we can do that in Liberia itself, because I believe it is so important that we that we do this now at this moment virtually, but it is equally important that we can continue doing this and that we will do this later in a later stage in real life with everyone here around the table, because everyone here has its own story. Everyone here has can contribute to this workshop, which I really am convinced that we should do that in the near future. The sooner, the better. But starting with this, let me try and guide you a little bit through the world of aviation and how aviation can be of matter in this so important subject of human trafficking. And while it is not a core task of an airline to fight human trafficking as such, it is part of our world and it is part of our responsibility towards it. And that's why I want to guide you a little bit through this and to give you an airline's perspective. So if I can show you the first slide, please. So in here, I don't have too many slides, so I don't want to make it one of these presentations with a lot of graphs and other things, but just as to support me and to guide you through this, I want to start with this. What is Brussels Airlines and what are we standing for? It is, when we come to the subject of human trafficking, we have to go through a whole way of understanding what we are and what we stand for. And that's what I try to explain with this. So you see Brussels Airlines here. And the first point I want to show you is the experience of Brussels Airlines, the experience more specifically on the African continent. What is the link of Brussels Airlines with the African continent? And that is something that goes way back. That goes way back to the beginning of the 1900s, the 1920s and 30s, when Sabina, you probably know Sabina, was founded. And because of the connection with Congo and other countries, they started flying there in the 30s. So there was already a deep connection from another point of view, of course, but that continued. Sabina went bankrupt, but fortunately Brussels Airlines was able to take that to take that role and continue flying to connecting the European continent with the African continent, and by extension actually connecting the world to the African continent, because that is very important. We at Brussels Airlines, we always believe that you don't fly to Africa just out of opportunistic possibilities. You fly there because you feel the need that you have to fly there. It is a continent with so many possibilities, but you need to have that experience to come over the hurdles you meet when you fly to the continent. So Africa has been a constant focus in our network, and that's why we say we don't want to leave it. And you've said it already in your introduction. We have actually proven that we care about it, because it is so important to keep that connection even when times are bad. And we will unfortunately have bad times ahead of us in the future as well, but we have to work for the best possible. And even though if things are going bad, we need to keep that connection. So that is our experience with Africa, and we really want to position ourselves as the experts in that, and to respect each other and go for that. Now, my second way here is the involvement, and that really comes together with this this experience. The Ebola crisis is one of the examples of the past, which are very typical for this company. It was very, very difficult to keep on flying during the Ebola crisis to the countries that were affected. Liberia was one of these countries, together with Sierra Leone and Guinea, but we kept on flying because it was necessary. We reduced the flight schedule because, of course, it's not easy, but we kept on flying. We have been informing our crews, because our crews were hearing horrific stories, which are, of course, going on during these kind of crises. But still, we were able to get them engaged and involved in this matter. We care about it. So we kept on flying. And then the next point is actually personal. And this is really, really important to me. Again, in your kind introduction, you told me that I have a special connection with Liberia, and that is indeed the case. It was the first sub-Sahara country I ever visited, and I still remember that the door of the aircraft went open, and the first thing I saw was the airport of Monrovia, Roberts International, and it was honestly it was a shock at that point, but immediately you are aware of what people are doing here with the limited resources they have, how they do it. That's amazing. And that I cannot stress that enough. We from our side in the Western world, we think everything is normal, but that's not the case. The way that our colleagues in Africa are working, sometimes in very, very difficult and challenging circumstances, that's something we have to admire. We have to admire the way they do that. And it learned me how to appreciate this. And it shows that the strength of people is enormous, especially on the African continent. So I had that connection with Liberia, and it never disappeared. I visited the country several times, most of the time for professional reasons, of course. But when I had the time, I wanted to learn more about the Liberians themselves, because they're really, really nice people. So another connection I had with it, and that is already going a bit more into the direction of the subject of today, is that the first time I arrived in Liberia was exactly because we had an issue. We had an issue of an unusual amount of illegal immigrants coming out of Liberia. It was in the 2007, if I'm not mistaken. We had an unusual amount, and we had to investigate what was going on. To cut a long story short, we did discover that someone who was working for us from another company, but working for us, we contracted them, was being involved in facilitating people. Of course, this is something we cannot accept, because this goes in to every of our values. So we had to make sure, okay, this is something we cannot accept. So we started fresh. We started with a clean sheet, and we started hiring people to form a good security and profiling team in Liberia. And we found some great people. And even nowadays, still one of the persons we hired is still working for us. She's such a great person. She does her job very well, and we're so happy that we could turn this, that we got rid of the facilitator and all the negative aspects that came with it, and that we were able to build a beautiful local team of Brussels Airlines employees in Liberia who are doing a terrific job day in and out. And we see that in the general results of how the station performs. Another thing that makes it very personal is actually the title of this workshop, Trapped in Transit. I was working at Brussels Airport as a security officer at that time, and I was walking through the terminals of Brussels Airport. All of a sudden, I bumped into a child. That child was terrified. She was in panic. I was like, oh, at that moment, I didn't have a lot of experience, but I was, what's going on here? But she was totally in panic. She ran away from someone or something or something like that. I was able, together with my colleagues, to calm her down a little bit, and she started talking. She had ran away from a person that was accompanying her. That person came from the United States and was flying to Liberia together with this little girl. And this little girl realized that something was going on. She realized that she was not going to Disneyland, because that was what was told to this little girl. This little girl was told by her parents, who lived in the United States, that someone would accompany her to go to Disneyland, and that she would be waited for by her aunt and uncle. Of course, this wasn't true. She wasn't going to Disneyland. Disneyland turned out to be Liberia. Now, she discovered it because, of course, if you fly to Brussels, you're not flying to Disneyland. She got scared and she ran away, and she bumped into me. So with this girl, I went to the authorities and we started talking and to find out what is really going on. And she explained the story. She was accompanied by someone that she didn't know, but she was told by her parents that this person needed to be trusted and that this person would bring her to Disneyland at the end and to her aunt and uncle. What was the real story behind it? The parents wanted to get rid of her. The parents wanted her to send over to Liberia to go and work there, because then that was very hard to hear like that, but she costed too much money. So they sent her to Liberia to work there and to get actually rid of her. This was a heartbreaking story. Fortunately, she ran away, and we were able to help her further. And that is the good part of this story. We were able to help her. This little girl, she got in hands of Belgian authorities. Belgian authorities took care of her during a couple of months, and she has been hosted by a foster family in Belgium while we were looking for a solution. And at the end, the Belgian authorities found family members who were willing to adopt her. So not the father and the mother. That was a totally different story. And of course, she didn't want to go back to them, but we got some caring family members who are living in the state of Washington near Seattle, and they were willing to adopt this girl. And the girl, until today, she still lives with her new family in the Seattle area. And from time to time, we do get a message that everything is going fine. So that is really a story with, fortunately, a happy end. But this girl is now happy with her new family. But she was really, in that sense, trapped in transit. So I couldn't think of a more typical story to give you in this presentation. Now, from personal, we go to protection. Protection, what does it mean? Well, protection is actually that all of us, we want to be protected. We want to feel protected. And I'm working in a protection department. So I do care about this subject, and I do want to help as much as possible. Safety and security are #1 priorities of airlines. If you read through airlines visions and other things, everyone will say safety and security are #1 priorities. I cannot agree more, but where we try to differentiate is that the security and safety, that it's part of a bigger goal. It's part of to protect people. We want to protect our guests. We want to protect everyone that comes on board. And we want that everyone who is on board of an aircraft of Brussels Airlines feels secure and safe. So the well-being is so important. We need to feel protected. And then the last thing I want to show you here is our vision. And that is the vision of Brussels Airlines is we will be the most reliable airline where everyone feels at home. And I want to focus on the second thing. Everyone needs to feel at home. So if you travel with us, you need to feel at home. And that is a culture that we want to strive for. And to feel at home, there's no place for human smuggling or human trafficking. There's no place for that. You need to feel at home. If you're on board of an aircraft, it has to be voluntary. You have to make sure that you want, that it's you who wants to travel and you're not traveling because someone else wanted to. No one can be forced. No one should be exploited. Again, you need to feel at home. A statement to support the vision, and that's also part of our culture here, is that we take our responsibility towards the environment and society. Always these kind of sentences, it's really nice to hear, but you have to take it in you have to put your words where your mouth is. So that is very, very important, and we take that serious. So that was a little bit about the culture within and how we come to then the real subject, the human trafficking. Now, human trafficking, we've heard it a lot nowadays, and as an airline, we are held liable for numerous things. One of it is illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is not human trafficking, I know that, but these things are sometimes linked. Authorities all over the world, they have their rules and regulations. And in times of COVID, even these rules and regulations have become more complicated than ever. And for the first time in history, immigration rules have been mixed with health regulations, which make it far more complicated. And airlines are being fined a lot of money for each and every passenger that thing to this by means of extensive document checks of all people who want to travel. And that's how we want to fight the part of the illegal immigration. But as I said, everything comes together at the end. The reason we have to do these checks, the reason we have to do checks for illegal immigration, yeah, that's not tackling the root cause of the real problem. It's a worldwide problem because people are looking for a better life. There's a reason why they're looking for a better life, because things need to improve, but then as a reaction, there are a lot of immigration rules. So it creates a nasty side effect. It's because we cannot move freely around because of all these rules, that people are exploiting this, and they are finding ways on how to get people migrated all over the world illegally. So we get from illegal immigration to people who help and facilitate those persons who want to migrate. So illegal immigration can turn into human smuggling. People are so desperate, and they are willing to risk a lot in search of a better life. And one example is the use of fake and forged passports. People use all of their savings to buy these guidance from facilitators and to use fake and forged travel documents. They are told fairy tales that with such documents they will reach a better world and a better life. But often reality can strike really hard when that is not the case. And while human smuggling is still with the consent of the person who is being smuggled, human trafficking is against the will of persons. And that's, of course, what makes it much more worse than anything else. It's one of the most despicable ways of treating fellow human beings. And what I heard from the very strong testimony earlier on, of course, the dignity of people, that's so important. And again, that's within our culture. So we need to fight this human trafficking. So as you see, there is a big difference between the illegal immigration, the human smuggling, and the human trafficking. But out of an airline's point of view, these three come together. We have to fight these three, and because they're all linked to each other. So if we go to the next slide, please. So there you see Brussels Airlines and our fight against illegal immigration. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. We are actually fighting organized crime. And although Brussels Airlines is not involved in law enforcement, Brussels Airlines recognize a problem, and we believe that we can assist in identifying the problem and creating a lot of awareness for it. As an airline, I believe it's our role and responsibility to respect two aspects of the fight against human trafficking. We have to report suspected cases of trafficking persons, whether it is on board of an aircraft or when it is on the ground. We need to be able to recognize this and to report this. And also something we commit to is that our personnel needs to be subject to internal report, that it's part of an SMS system. And an SMS system is a safety management system or a security management system, depends what you use it for. And this makes statistics and intelligence gathering on the issue of trafficking persons. So also we need to find out where do we have issues based on statistics, and then intervene to make sure that we can take the right measures. So I said before, but an airline is not only active high up in the skies, but also on the ground. And that's in fact where we need to start and try to identify human trafficking. If we can stop it even before the flight takes place, it's better. But of course, we need to do that as early as possible. Also, I want to point out, it's not only the airline, of course, that has its responsibilities. It is also the authorities, the airport authorities, police, even military, depends who's in charge of the airport. And the authorities should help us, and we can do this together, but we should establish training requirements for all people that work at the airport on identifying and responding to trafficking of human beings. We have to ensure that procedures are in place to combat trafficking in person, including clear reporting systems. So it's always about this responding and reporting. And we need communicating roles and responsibilities as part of a national reporting process. So it has to go further than just the airport. To give you an example, in Brussels, here at Brussels Airport, we have a committee that organizes sessions in the battle against human trafficking. And this committee has created a basic checklist used to recognize human trafficking. And those who were here yesterday, you've seen in the presentation of Atlanta Airport also some of these indicators. And that's really important. that we keep on repeating these indicators, because it are these indicators that will help me and you in recognizing potential human trafficking. So again, this committee here in Brussels, they focused on some of the indicators, and although let's say 90% is the same, there's always, or some of the indicators are different, but they come from the same mindset. We have to look for a specific behavior. We have to look for ways that people are behaving themselves, which is not normal, or we feel that something is wrong. We all know the gut feeling itself as well, and that gut feeling can also be supported by this indicators. And what we tell the people that which are working for us as frontliners, as the ones who are dealing with passengers, talking to passengers, and so on, is there's nothing wrong with starting a very informal conversation. Just show interest in where you're going. Why do you fly? First time flying? Are you visiting family? Where will you stay? What are your plans? Do you have anything specific you want to do? You want to visit? Really start a very simple conversation. But during such conversations, we can see indicators. We can see some of the indicators that we talked about. So use really simple questions to get to these. So the indicators we're looking at, and that were mentioned on the checklist that was provided by the Belgian authorities, is one of the first things is if persons are not holding their own travel documents. Of course, you have to put this into perspective, because we as an airline, we have to check documents. We check these documents, and if a family is approaching, it is quite possible that the father or the mother are taking all the travel documents and placing them there in order to have them checked and looked at. That is possible. So it's not because one of the indicators is showing that it's really a problem. You have to put everything into perspective. If you see that someone really cannot get hold of their own travel documents by means of, for example, if you would give a travel document back to its owner, and all of a sudden someone else is grabbing it really like, no, you cannot have it, then you might think, what's the reason behind this? Another way is, I told you, really simple questions to start a conversation. If that person wants to avoid or the conversation, avoiding to answer the question, or simply not able to answer the question, that might be a flag as well, a red flag. Same goes actually not willing to cooperate. Or look at some more subtle things, like if someone is looking over his or her shoulder, looking for some kind of confirmation from everyone. If they've been asking a question that they don't really know what to answer, and they're looking for some confirmation of someone else, that could be a sign that this person is not really knowing what they're gonna do. Another aspect can be if you get an answer from someone that it looks like an answer that is studied, that is told by them. You have to answer this. And if people are reacting in that way, just giving you basically a correct answer, but telling it in a way that you feel this is not natural, then that could be a sign as well. If you ask a question to someone and someone intervenes and wants to speak in name of him or her, that also can be a sign. The sign I saw with the story I told you about the little girl that was running away in Brussels airport, she showed signs of fear. That was, of course, very obvious that something was wrong. Also, keep your eyes open. There are a lot of non-spoken behavior as well. Look how people move. Look how people are, for example, they're waiting for a flight. Someone wants to, the victim wants to go to a toilet, but isn't allowed to, or is escorted even to that toilet. So if you see this kind of non-natural behavior, that could be a sign of we have a potential problem going on here. So looking at people and they're trying to avoid eye contact, again, by itself, it's not that bad. But if you again put it in context and you have several of these indicators, it might show you something is wrong. And of course, another very easy thing to see is, imagine you travel from Liberia to Belgium We all know that in Belgium right now, it is really cold, it's raining, it's windy. You're not gonna travel to Belgium in your shorts and your flip-flops. That might also be an indicator that this person is not really aware of what they're doing or where they're going. So again, this can be an indicator that could show this person is traveling against their will. Also, it's not only the victim or the potential victim that you can keep an eye on, it's also the person who is accompanying them. Does that person look nervous to you? Does they really interfere all the time? Or do they become rude and or they ignore you, that they want to block the conversation? That all these things might be a way that people show something is not right. When you see this kind of indicators and you don't feel well, or you feel something is going wrong, do not hesitate to contact, for example, a colleague or a supervisor of yours, because they can help you in either having the same opinion at the end, and then most likely something is really on, or they can put it in perspective. If people are afraid, again, all these indicators, you have to put them in a certain perspective. If someone shows signs of fear, yeah, maybe it's because they're flying for the first time. It's not always easy to differentiate that fear from another kind of fear. So you really need to make that story and to make sure that something is going on. Not these indicators at itself are not always issues. They can have an explanation, but we have to have a look at them. So you have on the one side the victim, but on the other side the facilitator or the companion. Also, they have indicators that we can look at. I cannot emphasize enough also the need to have a standardized reporting system, reporting these suspected cases of trafficking on board, but also on the ground. And that is something we lack as an airline. This reporting system does not really exist worldwide. Of course, we work together with authorities in the different countries, but also in Belgium, but there's no such system where we can go to and each and every problem we had will be dealt by this authority. So the reporting, a standardized reporting system is something we really need and is something we really ask from authorities in general, not only for the Liberian authorities, but really from the authorities all around the world, at least for Brussels Airlines where we fly to. Whenever you see that human trafficking also is going on, or you have at least the impression this is going on, it's also important that that you keep to your facts and to what you can do. I personally believe you should not really interfere, because then your action could bring more danger to the victim even. So whenever it is obvious that you have discovered a situation of human trafficking, do not attempt to rescue the victim or to confront the trafficker or something like that at the airport. Therefore, we also have authorities. The fact that you recognized and that you reported these situations make you actually already a hero. And that is what you all are, heroes. So, of course, we have to look out for pitfalls as well. When you're looking at these indicators, let's take the example of an unhappy child. Well, not all unhappy children are being trafficked. I can imagine, and I speak for myself, that I was not necessarily always the easiest child, and growing up brings some pains and so on. And the smallest conflict with your parents looks like a world-sized problem. And I think maybe a lot of us here have, and I say that between brackets, of course, have hated your parents for at least 5 minutes when we were denied a candy and we had to eat an apple instead. It was at that moment the worst thing that could happen to me. And of course, if such a situation takes place and I'm looking bad at my parents and don't want to travel with them, yeah, that doesn't mean there is trafficking. So we really have to be careful when we identify this human trafficking. And in that sense, a clear protocol also must be created for reporting this potential human trafficking. If you make a false accusation towards a certain situation or towards a certain person, that can cause a very awkward and uncomfortable situation. We should not use this as an excuse not to report. But we need to point out that mistakes can happen. And at Brussels Airlines, we adapting the just culture. And if you don't know what just culture means that we accept that mistakes are being made. And to be more specific, I call it honest mistakes. So everyone here, again, is human, and humans make mistakes. And if we make a mistake, we must be able to admit it, and we continue, and we learn from that mistake. So even in doubt, it's better to save a person or potentially save a person, and then make a mistake that this person was not trafficked or smuggled, than the other way around. That's that should be a very clear message. We shouldn't be afraid of coming forward whenever we see something is not normal. And that's why I think it's so important that we reach out to the different authorities, and in this case, to the Liberian authorities. Brussels Airlines can provide its staff, so we can provide our staff with adequate training, but we will need the support of the authorities as well, by means of having a clear reporting line where we can go with our concerns. And then I want to go to the next slide, please. So on this slide, I just show you some statistics, and statistics, it is what it is, but there you see some of our destinations, and I pulled out the absolute numbers. But to give you an idea about these SMS systems, how they can help us in fighting the everything from illegal immigration to human trafficking. So as you can see, some of the stations there are mentioned, and then you see on the left-hand side, you see the different colors. The first one, the blue one, is 2019, the yellow one is 2020, and the gray one is the current year, 2021. And then you see the evolution of all the stations and how they are doing. And for to make it easy, I'll call this the illegal immigration part. There you see that some stations, or that a station is performing not very well. You see there's all of a sudden it becomes very high. That gives us the signal something is going on in that station. And that gave us we needed to go to this station and check what is really going on now. What is the reason of this high graph, meaning a lot of illegal immigration? So we went to investigate it, and again, unfortunately, we found out that someone that was working for us was involved in some kind of facilitation, not even actively, but passively, which is equally worse for me, because that person was in a position where he or she knew that what was going on was not right, but that person closed his eyes, and that's not okay neither. So we need to take action if we see some things are going wrong. Of course, identifying the problem is one thing, preventing it for the future is another thing. So again, we set up a program that will train our local people in this matter, to make sure that we can perform as a healthy and good airline there. Another graph we use to see is the graph on the right. And there you see the differences where we look at what kind of illegal immigration do we have from these countries. And everything which is red is regulatory. So that means that if people are traveling with a passport that's been expired, that's not good. But these are the things we can avoid easily by doing our job, reading the passport, and make sure that no one with an expired passport arrives at a destination. But it's not really like this is the things we are looking for in human smuggling, or even worse, human trafficking. There we go to the other specifics, and you see that the yellow part is, for example, forgeries and fakes. That is how many times we stop forged and fake passports before they come on board, or forged and fake travel documents. And this already gives us a view of what is going on in these different stations. This gives us an idea. If there are a lot of forged and fake passports, that might show that there is a network of human smuggling or potentially human trafficking going on. So this really these clear figures give that information to us. The same goes for imposters. Imposters are persons who are traveling with real and valid documents, but not their own. They look like the person who is on the picture, but they're not the person. So they are being, again, facilitated by someone else in this matter. And then the last color you see UTR. UTR means unclear travel reasons. And that's also a very important one to keep an eye on, because if you talk about unclear travel reasons, that means that these persons are traveling with correct documents, with correct travel documents, a valid passport, a valid visa. They arrive at their destinations, but they're still not allowed to enter the country, because when they are interrogated by an immigration officer, they don't have a good story. They don't have a good explanation why they travel. They don't seem to be able to explain what they are going to do. And also this can be a sign that something is going on, because if people don't know why they're traveling, or cannot give you a good reason to travel, then that is how it ends. So with this, I actually want to show you that as an airline, we have possibilities on how to detect certain behavior. We are not always directly capable of linking it to either illegal immigration, human smuggling, or human trafficking. But since these three are at a certain moment linked to each other, we are able to stop it, to be the last barrier before these people are really being transported. So that's where I think it is, and it will always be very important that we train our colleagues on the African continent, but also in Brussels and also in our other outstations, to get them aware, to create this awareness about the problem of human trafficking, and that we really need to stop it. And we, as a last barrier, we can stop it there, or we can try to stop it there, but we will need the help. And of course, we should never forget the root cause of the problems. Let me finish by repeating what other speakers emphasized as well. We need to train awareness and recognitions of human trafficking, but we may not forget about the root cause. Stopping human trafficking the moment someone wants to board an aircraft often means that these victims have been exploited already for quite some time. But I believe if we all put our shoulders under this and work together, then we can make it happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jory, for that powerful presentation, not only representing your airline, but also representing your personal story. It was great to hear your excitement about the time you touched down in Liberia for the first time. I can remember the first time I touched down in Liberia, and I had a similar feeling, a feeling of being welcomed by the country, but also the feeling of a new chapter opening up in my life. And that came through in your story as well. I want to thank you for your airline's commitment to Africa, because we know as travelers to Africa, it's not always the easiest place to get to from other parts of the world. At the same time, there's so many reasons to travel there, and we're always hoping that it gets easier so that we can build that global community that is only made possible in part through air travel. So thank you for all of your contributions to that. We have a question that came into the chat box, but I also have a number of questions that I wanted to ask based on your presentation. Since we're on the topic of personal stories, I'm going to start with the question that we got from Sibo. He says, the story of the little girl is very touching. He said most Liberians face difficulties with their kids, especially when they get to the United States, with the change of behaviors. As a result, sometimes they want to send them back to experience some hardships as a means of discipline, but they don't let their children know this, that's part of the parental guidance of sending them back home. So the question is, how should parents or guardians send the kids back home without creating a false narrative that it could be seen as trafficking? I think maybe this question in part comes from the fact that due to travel expense, sometimes people say to their friend who's going to Liberia, can my child travel alongside you to get back home, and I'll stay here, they'll go and you'll be the guide. So there might be that case of someone who's not related, et cetera, kind of being together in the airport. Can you address situations like that and put the parents' minds at ease about helping their children move back and forth?
Yes, absolutely. And it's not because a child is sent back or traveling with someone else that we immediately talk about human trafficking. And there I want to come back to one of the first slide I actually showed, and that's our experience with Africa. And I believe that is so important that we keep that in our culture, because that's where we see that. Let's call it by names. In the Western world, most likely we wouldn't send our child with someone we don't really know. But in the African culture, we notice that these things are happening. So again, it's all about putting it into perspective, and it's these indicators which are so important. And you look at the indicators, and at the end you make an evaluation. And we've seen it numerous times that children are sent back and forward to visit family or to visit friends, and because they cannot travel alone, they travel with a friend. And in the African community, we have a lot of friends because we know each other, and especially when we travel. I don't want to derive too much from this question, but something that is really beautiful, what we see when Africans are traveling, is when someone gets stuck or when someone gets in trouble, they help each other. If they know each other or not, they help each other. While other, let's say, cultures are not in that way. They just think very selfish, and they continue. So in that perspective, I can see it that it is possible that people are sent, children are sent back and forward, even though they're not accompanied by their own parents. It is sometimes difficult to make the distinction, but of course we understand that it happens, and we will not see every person with a child as a human trafficker.
And I actually really appreciate your very nuanced answer. The fact that as a company, you're saying, pay attention to culture. We know culture, we care about your cultural norms, and we want to make you able to travel within your own cultural way of doing it. You know, I've seen parents say to their kids, particularly when they're traveling internationally or back home for the first time, they say, pay attention to the other Liberians around you. And if you don't know what's going on, just go up to one of them and ask them, you know, so they already have this norm of trusting fellow people from the country and wanting to understand that there's a norm of care that just exists within that community. So it's wonderful to see you sort of say that from an official perspective from Brussels Airlines. We got another question that I think in a way is related. And I'm going to mention that question to you. This person says, you know, how do you react when a suspected perpetrator of human trafficking that you're, you know, trying to assess starts saying that you're interfering in their private affairs, or, you know, they sort of pull out that excuse that, wait, you're getting in my personal business. How do you respond to that? And it could be someone suspected of trafficking or someone who's not trafficking. Either way, they could levy that self-defense. How do you respond to that?
It's always very case specific, of course, and again, a lot comes from experience, but to have the awareness. If someone responds like that, then you don't have to keep on insisting, for example, in asking questions, but you back off a little bit and you observe, because observing will teach you a lot more than try to convince that person that he's a human trafficker, for example. This might sound a little bit weird, but it is really like that. So back off a little bit and observe what is going on. And if you see that the person that you suspect to be a human trafficker is then going back to, or is going to get seated with the potential victim, and you see the reaction of that person towards the victim, out of these kind of behavior, you can learn a lot, and you can see something is not right, or the other way around. Let's say that the victim itself was also shocked because he or she wasn't being trafficked, and they're like, my God, they're treating us here like something is going on while we are normal people traveling. So really, my suggestion would be take a step back, observe a little bit, and then see what your next action is. Also, don't hesitate to inform a colleague. Say,
I think you froze briefly.
okay.
Can you just say the last sentence again? I apologize.
My last sentence was actually never hesitate to ask a second or a third opinion. Explain a little bit what is going on, and if you have another opinion, more people know more than just one person.
Right. I mean, I think that you're actually giving us a window into the mind of how security professionals think. I mean, I love your point about how, you know, noticing pieces of information that don't align. You know, we all kind of have a sense of what's normal, and you say you kind of trust that gut sense when things aren't lining up, or you're seeing more than one indicator. You know, sometimes one indicator alone isn't enough, but when you see more than one, and just that observation will lead you there. That's a great point. Someone has asked a question about how you determine an adopted child versus a trafficked child on a flight to another country, and, you know, sort of how you make that distinction. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and there we are, let's say, also helped by certain documents, because this is not new neither. We do see it regularly that children are adopted, and honestly, sometimes if you look at their little faces, they look scared, because they're being taken away from the environment they know. They all of a sudden have to go on a big metal bird that they've never seen before, makes a lot of noise. So of course these children are afraid. And again, and this is it's a very good question, and I really like that people are thinking about it, because we do see indicators, but we have to place these indicators right, and that's the difficulty, of course. We do see a scared child, and let's say a scared Liberian child with two white parents or one white parent. Okay, what is this? Is this human smuggling? Is this smuggling? Is this trafficking? Is this adopting? We have to make that distinction, and that's also why it's very important that authorities provide us with the necessary information. A good adoption process is key for that. An adoption process is not that a person goes to a village and buys a child and takes it along, even though they have maybe good intentions, because that's also possible, because the adoption process is for a reason very hard and difficult. And some people want to avoid that by just going somewhere and buying someone, but that's totally wrong. So a good adoption process is key in this sense, and that we can verify this, and that we can, if we have doubts, go to the authority and say, okay, we have a doubt about this, this and this. Can you please check it out if this is really an adoption the way it should be, or do we talk about something else?
Thank you. I got a word that Lena Wright has a question. If Lena Wright could be allowed to ask her question, we would welcome that. And Lena, you will need to come off mute to ask your question. Lena, are you there? All right, I'm not hearing Lena at the moment, but while Lena is getting ready, we got another question from Aramatha Fala, who asked, can the airlines ask IATA to prepare a specific course that they can take on human trafficking as a safety issue?
Absolutely. And one of the good things nowadays is that different authorities are getting engaged in this, and they are creating different trainings. And I know that civil aviation authorities, for example, they have good connections with ICAO. With ICAO, and ICAO has very good guidelines on how to find this, so they can translate this into a training. Also, a big organization like IATA, which is very known in the aviation industry, provides these kind of trainings. But also, we as Brussels Airlines, we have some experience and we can help it. And that's why I want to speak out here as well. I said it in the beginning, I'm looking forward to travel more again, and then more specifically, maybe let's go to Liberia and make it work and give our expertise and help the people around the table here, the virtual table.
Thank you. I heard someone come off mute. I don't know if it was Lena. If Lena, if you're there to ask your question, please jump in. I'm not sure. She may still be having trouble. So let me ask a few more questions. And one is you had that nice table of statistics, and it was nice how you broke down the different categories of problems that you sometimes encounter at your different airports. And I was curious, how often or frequently do you review or update those statistics that you showed? Is that something you do weekly, monthly, daily, yearly? Like, how often are you updating and looking at those statistics?
Basically daily. But that's because in the Brussels Airlines world, I have a very nice team that works in Brussels, and these are security officers, and that's where I started my career as well. And they are in constant contact with our different stations, and they are also being appointed as a coach of these stations. And a coach means that they need to help out and to look for certain trends. And it's up to them to discover these trends and to see something is going wrong in one of my stations, and then to go and find what exactly is going wrong. And also, but this is then on let's say on a higher level. Every month I have to I also have to give a presentation internally to higher management within the company, and there I show these figures as well, and then we say, okay, this is a risk area. This is an area where we see suddenly a lot more what we then call in the terminology inadmissible passengers. So what is the root cause of this? Should we look further? Is it a one-off? What's going on? So at least once a month, these figures are presented to a higher level, but on a daily basis, we keep on looking at it and making our stations aware. Oh, this is going on. This is what you see.
And then so you have security teams at each of the airports that in turn do the investigation to kind of analyze why the statistics are changing. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So in Brussels, it's centralized, basically, and they keep contact with the local security teams to find out what is going on.
Okay, we just got a new question in from someone at the Carter Center in Monrovia, and they said Brussels Airlines is one of the leading airlines to Africa, precisely Liberia. How do you think to replicate the message to common people about your experience with the little girl so that people can have confidence on your flights?
Well, just be yourself when you're traveling, and we need to again. It all comes to these indicators, and it's very difficult to explain this, but it's I really want to tell you I understand what is going on, and that is something we need. We need as Brussels Airlines what we need to train. If I have new people working for me in my department, for example, I always tell them, travel to Africa, go to Africa, because you need to know how what the culture is. You need to appreciate the way people are working there. So it is such an important thing for us to learn the culture, to learn certain of the habits. And I'm not going to claim that we are Africans or becoming African, no, but we need to understand what is going on. We need to understand how they react. There's so many different ways in how people in Africa are behaving towards us. Some cultures or in some countries, they're very talkative and they want to discuss everything with you. Some don't want to say anything, but at the end, they want the same. So it's really important for us to understand how what the mindset is and what the culture is. And so I can only tell you that out of Brussels Airlines, we do our utmost to understand the culture. And if we understand the culture, then we can help you, and you can be sure that you're traveling securely and safely on board of our flights.
Well, one of the things I know is that in Liberia, your office is very prominently located right there on Tubman Boulevard, where most people pass, every day. And, there's always the option of hanging banners out right there with messaging about these issues that people, that thousands of people will see every day. So I'm so glad that you encourage your colleagues and coworkers to go to Africa to learn the culture. On cue, we have music. We have another another question, and this might be the last one. And that is, how can Brussels Airlines help local security in Liberia be more effective in tracking and the protection of persons? So I guess it's about a relationship, your security team to security teams in Liberia. How can that relationship be strengthened? What are you doing? What could you do more of?
Well, we can always do more. So, and we will do more. Connecting and getting that that network and that reporting lines and everything I told before, and coming to Liberia. That's one of the main things, and set up that training, help each other with information. Information sharing is key, and help each other in it. And if we fight the same fight, then we will help.
Well, thank you. This has really been a wonderful conversation. I'd like to invite Honorable Blanford back into the conversation, just because I know she'd love to personally thank you for representing Brussels Airlines in our meeting this morning. And as she comes back, I'll just remind our audience that we're about to have a 15-minute break. So whatever time zone you're in, if you're in the United States, coming back at 10:15 a.m. Eastern time, if you're in Liberia, coming back at 2:15 GMT, and if you're in Brussels, coming back at 15 p.m. But before that, Cynthia, would you like to say a few words going out?
Sure, thank you very much. Jory, outstanding. Your performance today, your input, your feedback, your way forward, your solutions. This has been just an important and engaging conversation. I assure you, in our relationship with LAA and Hartsfield-Jackson and Brussels Airlines, we are going to get on the ground and work out an opportunity for this hands-on training with two of our strongest partners in the industry. I think this is a natural next step way forward, and you can believe we will be back in touch with you and your leadership to plan something in the very, very near future. So again, on behalf of our partnership team here, we want to say a special thanks and appreciation to you for all the good work you have done on behalf of your airline.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. So we'll see everybody back in 15 minutes, where we'll hear from Laura Newman of the Carter Center. See you soon.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jory.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. It's 15 minutes past the hour. I hope everyone's had a chance to have a satisfying break in between our very thought-provoking sessions. We have had to do a little bit of juggling today, but what's a conference or a workshop or a summit without a little bit of juggling? Thank you for keeping your spirits high throughout all of that. I want to now turn the event over to Honorable Blanford once again to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, thank you very much, Layli. And I'm very happy now to introduce to you in this section on trafficking experts, so to speak, in group discussion. The Carter Center has been a long-standing partner of the Republic of Liberia for almost 20 years. They have an office in Liberia as well, and doing an outstanding and incredible work. I'm very happy to introduce to you a friend and colleague of mine, Ms. Laura Newman, Director of the Rule of Law Program at the Carter Center here in Atlanta, Georgia. Laura directs and implements the Carter Center's programming regarding transparency, good governance, and access to justice, including projects in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Laura developed the innovative Access to Information Legislation Implementation Assessment Tool and the Women and the Right of Access to Information project. In February of 2018, Laura convened the conference, Inform Women, Transform Lives, which culminated with the Atlanta Declaration for the Advancement of Women's Rights of Access to Information. Laura has written a number of articles and book chapters on the right of access to information. She has edited 6 widely distributed guidebooks on fostering transparency and preventing corruption, and has presented at numerous international seminars on access to information, legislation, implementation, enforcement, and use. She has also served as a consultant to the U.S. Department of State, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank, among others. Prior to joining the Carter Center in August of 1999, Laura was staff attorney for senior law at Legal Action of Wisconsin and is a 1993 graduate of the University of Wisconsin Law School. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present a very good friend of mine, Laura Newman. Laura?
Thank you. Can you all hear me? When it's written down, your bio, it seems very short, but when it's spoken, I realize how long it is. So apologies to everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me a few minutes to provide some thoughts, and many congratulations to the organizers of this critical workshop. I also want to thank my team, our team in Liberia. I know you mentioned that we have an office. The Carter Center has a phenomenal team of experts, both issues of gender as well as access to justice and transparency, working together to support their country. So human trafficking, as we've heard, is a problem around the world, and it's intensified during the COVID-19 pandemic. Traffickers have exploited new vulnerabilities and preyed on many who experienced increased food insecurity, closed schools, and a loss of income during the pandemic. Globally, services for survivors have become more difficult to access, and justice for victims of trafficking even further out of reach. The government of Liberia, in this light, has recently passed the revised Trafficking in Persons Act. I know you've heard about this. I know it was discussed yesterday. This new act includes provisions for increased minimum sentencing for perpetrators and restitution for victims of trafficking. The Carter Center applauds this great advance. But as important as the law is, even more so is to assure that the law is being fully implemented. And implementation is dependent on many people. It's certainly part of what the government of Liberia must do, including the security forces, the security services, but it also includes the private sector and civil society. So when the Honorable Consul General and Ms. Lilian contacted the Carter Center, we were thrilled to be able to bring some of our key civil society partners to the discussion, as it's really them that's going to play such a critical role in identifying and preventing human trafficking. And we're so pleased to make this link. As Attorney Ibrahim discussed earlier, we need all sectors to be involved in stopping human trafficking. She mentioned fishermen, hunters, market workers, local communities, and mothers. And as Ms. Marpan noted, the context around human trafficking is localized. For example, when we talk about Liberia, it may be less of an inter-country trafficking as it is an intra-country trafficking of people, particularly women and children, as they're moved within the country from one county to another. Considering the role of international travel is important, and that last speaker was phenomenal. I want to use him in the future too. I hope he's still on. Jory is amazing. And it's important to think about the international travel, of course, but perhaps even more so, we need to think about what it looks like in Liberia. And for that, the first question I think we ask is, how can we engage the motorcyclists and the transport union without Liberia, as they could be the front line in identifying and preventing human trafficking? How do we consider the role, and when we consider the role of youth, child marriage, access to justice, economics, and the complexities of the familiar and cultural norms, we need to think about all those different actors in Liberia that can come together. For these factors, we need to engage the chiefs, lawyers, civil society organizations, media, and transport workers to prevent human trafficking. For that reason, we're thrilled that with us in Liberia in the Monrovia office are the leadership of the National Council for Chiefs and Elders, the Liberia National Bar Association, the Association of Female Lawyers of Liberia, the Women's NGO Secretariat of Liberia, the Federation of Liberian Youth. We're joined by the Press Union of Liberia, the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission, NAMOT, Partners for Democratic Development, and the Federation of Motorcycle Transport Unions of Liberia. Working together, they're going to support the stopping of trafficking. They can provide, but, CSOs, as we've said, and traditional leaders are on the front line. They're on the front line in providing services, supporting survivors of trafficking, and mending communities that have lost people, including children, to trafficking. Raising awareness of what is considered human trafficking and the implications of the law will fall to these organizations and the local media. Traffickers are often trusted adults or community members who falsely promise greater economic or educational opportunity in urban areas. Particularly in Liberia's most rural and hard-to-reach communities, the role that CSOs and traditional leaders will play in combating trafficking is incredibly important. We also need to remember our security sector, including the Liberian National Police and the Liberia Immigration Services. They cannot be underestimated when considering the implementation of this revised anti-trafficking law. For that reason, we are also pleased that members of the Liberian National Police are with us at the Carter Center in our Monrovia office. But awareness of trafficking, whether that be forced labor, domestic servitude, sexual slavery, commercial sexual exploitation, or child soldier, is only the first step. I think there's a lot of questions that we still need to ask when we think about the Liberian context. For example, what happens if human trafficking is identified? Where should the person go? Who do you contact and what can they do? Is there a hotline, for example, when there's a suspected case or for survivors? How do you distinguish between a child that is being sent to a relative so he or she can go to school or for better support versus a child that is being sent against her will for forced labor or sex? And what are the resources for survivors of human trafficking? Have the police and immigration services been trained? Is there the capacity and resources for investigating and prosecuting these crimes? And what measures can be undertaken to further inform and educate the public? These are just some of the issues that our colleagues in Liberia will consider as they look to implement the revised law. And the Carter Center stands ready to support these anti-trafficking efforts. As a first step, the center is coordinating with the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia to identify participants for an upcoming U.S. Department of State International Visitor Leadership Program focused on human trafficking. Participants will travel to the U.S. to learn more about alternate models for laws, training, and practices that, as appropriate, can inform implementation in the Liberian context. Once again, the Carter Center is pleased to participate today, and we're looking forward to working hand in hand with the government of Liberia, security sector, civil society, and traditional leaders to combat human trafficking in all of its forms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura, for that. Sorry, it took me a minute to come off mute. That was really helpful framing, because I think that one of the most important roles that the Carter Center plays in the Liberian context is as a convener. And we have talked about throughout this workshop that it sort of takes a village to end trafficking, and to be able to pull those different important actors, particularly the community serving organizations, into a room, at a table, in conversation, and not just for one-off conversations, but for ongoing, enduring conversations. That's really been a strength of the Carter Center's work on the ground. And that's really a big part of why we wanted the Carter Center to be involved in this meeting today. And I do want to thank you, because I know that you're in Liberia. I wanted to thank you for convening all of the people who are in your conference room today, able to participate in this workshop. And they've been sending so many good questions in the question and answer box. And so I appreciate that. I'm sure that there may be one or two people who have questions that they want to ask you now. And we do have a few minutes if there's anyone. If you do, please put your question into the question and answer box, if at all possible. I know some people have been using the chat and we're able to do that as well. But, I think that while we're waiting to see if anything comes in, I would love to hear you say more just about how the Carter Center itself has built effective relationships around a variety of issues and areas of work, and what can we, in terms of working on the issue of trafficking, learn from what you've done in these other areas?
Thank you. And just to be clear, I'm actually in my home. Unfortunately, as Cynthia knows, hurt my back. And so I stayed in Atlanta. So all of the work of convening has been by my colleagues who are in that room. And I know we've heard from a few of them. When we think about the role of the Carter Center, certainly, thank you for noting that we do value the ability to convene people. And I think that comes from just the staying course of the Carter Center. We've been in Liberia for decades, and we are led by an all Liberian team. Every single person that's working on our justice and our accountability and our transparency and our gender work, they are all phenomenal Liberian experts and all Liberians. And I think that's really important because they bring that localized, that contextualized knowledge that none of us can from living afar. We have been able to bring in lawyers that have worked with us for a very long time. You heard from one of our attorneys. So we have lawyers, we have people who are community organizers, we have specialists and experts, and together they create this incredible mosaic that is the Carter Center in Liberia. We also have another program there, and I think it's important to mention our mental health program. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that hasn't been discussed as much, and I hope that, when you go back to Liberia, and I'm hoping, we can join you on that, is to really think about the survivors and the trauma and the mental health supports that they're going to need. But I think what you're seeing in the Carter Center, if we could put them on video, what you'll see are the most incredible colleagues. So it is about convening, but it's because we have these amazing partners. And I listed them from the youth through to the traditional leaders. And they've been incredible, amazing partners to the Carter Center throughout our work there. So it's really them that deserves all of the accolades. And we know that. And so we appreciate them and thank them. And that room is full of every bit of knowledge that I think is needed, including the Liberian National Police, to really make a dent in human trafficking in Liberia. And so it's exciting to see them all come together. And I think if we empower them to work together, they will make the difference.
Well, thank you. And I also want to lend my thanks to everyone that's in the Carter Center conference room in Liberia right now. I've actually been to those headquarters and I look forward to visiting again. I know Cynthia and I are going to be traveling to Liberia next month, and I hope we get an opportunity to sit with some of the very people who are in that room right now. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your expertise and your point of view, because it's going to be very important moving forward. As I've said more than once throughout this workshop, we really view today's workshop or this set of workshops as the beginning of something, not a one-off, not the end of something, but we really want to put a stake in the ground on this issue. We want to attract other people who are interested in working on it and then find effective ways to work together. So I hope we'll have a chance to keep working together over time. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to transition now into our next session, which is another opportunity to speak with experts. And at this time, I would like to introduce Professor Lenny B. Benson, who is the Distinguished Chair of Human Rights and Immigration Law at New York Law School in Manhattan. She has been teaching and writing in the field since 1994. She's actively engaged in fostering pro bono legal services for immigrants. And in that role, she is currently serving as a senior fellow to Immigrant Arc, a nonprofit organization in New York that coordinates and supports over 22 nonprofit legal services organizations. She founded the Safe Passage Project, a nonprofit housed at New York Law School that serves immigrant children. Safe Passage Project is one of the largest providers of free legal services to immigrant youth in New York and is currently aiding more than 1,300 young people. Her most recent book with Mary Kroc is Protecting Migrant Children in Search of Best Practice. And in fact, I just met Lenny recently because we were working together to bring an Afghan woman activist to the Wellesley Centers for Women, given the recent crisis crisis in Afghanistan. And I was so impressed with the breadth of her knowledge about the migration of youth and children around the world. And we got into a conversation about how that intersects with trafficking issues. And she agreed to share her legal knowledge around those issues. So she will provide a very unique perspective on the trafficking topic that we've been discussing throughout the workshop. So Lenny, I'm turning it over to you now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm joining you today from Arizona, which is my family home. I want to first acknowledge and thank Honorable Ms. Blanford and Professor Marpan of Wellesley for having me. I've only been able to listen this morning. I was deeply impressed by Jerry Hendricks and Laura Newman educating us, and I would love to hear more as well from all the participants. So just to give you up front, I'm going to be speaking for about 30 minutes, but we're going to have lots of opportunity for question and answer with Professor Marpian organizing that portion. Before I launch my slideshow, I'd also like to say that I am grateful to the lives that have been shared with me of immigrant youth from around the world, from the lawyers who have stepped up to provide their services without cost in the United States, to the school teachers, the social workers, the family members, the police officers, the community prosecutors, all of whom have to come together as a community of support to recognize, identify, and help these youth. And I wouldn't be able to share the stories and the information I'm going to share with you if those people didn't have trust in me. And so I really appreciate the audience today, and I hope I'll be able to be a resource for you in the future. And I really appreciate being here. Now I'm going to start my slideshow. I want you to know every image in this slideshow is not an actual client. They're all stock photos. I have a strong belief in protecting the privacy of individuals who make applications. While some are brave and want to come forward and be public activists, I usually try to help people shelter their identity. But the stories I'm going to share with you are based on real cases. So give me one moment as I now share my screen. Okay. And we're going to go from the beginning here. I think you've already heard today that one of the issues, especially for those in the transportation industry, but also for those of us in the receiving country, whether it's a child traveling from the US to Liberia, as we heard Jerry speaking, or someone who's come to the United States, it's being able to see the situation. Now, my remarks today are going to focus on young people under the age of 21 or under the age of 18. We use both age dates in our law, but I do not mean to exclude that some of the things I'm talking about would also be available to adults. So this is a worldwide phenomenon that children are on the move. The UNHCR, that's the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, estimates that at least 50% of all of the people who are displaced in their own country or have traveled to another country are women and children. And of the women and children group, a large percentage are what we define as unaccompanied children, children who are not traveling with a parent or legal guardian. Some are traveling with a relative or a trusted friend of the family, or even someone who we might call a smuggler, or we might call, it depends on your point of view, a person who is helping someone escape. And what the US law in particular, which is what the focus of my presentation, does give many additional protections and solutions for children who are not traveling in the care of a formal legal guardian or one of those parents. So I'm going to tell you the story of Bethany. She was about 14 years old when an aunt of hers contacted her and said, please come to the United States. I want you to live with me and my children. I have space for you in my home. You'll be able to go to a better school. In Bethany's home country, her family could no longer afford school uniforms or school books. The family was extremely poor. And the aunt was already regularly sending money home to support the family. So Bethany had no visa to come to the United States. So she did as many unaccompanied youth do in the world. She traveled from her home nation over 4,000 miles by train, by foot, by bus to reach our southwest border. When she reached the southwest border, she surrendered herself to the immigration officials at the border. And she said, I don't have a passport, I don't have a visa to come, but I can't stay in my home country. As, again, she's traveling without any adult, except she has an invitation from this aunt. When a child is caught at our airports or at our northern border or our southern border, that child is taken into the custody of the Department of Health and Human Services, into a division called the Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR for short. But that office is not treating these children as refugees, nor is it helping them resettle. It's simply the only federal agency that had any expertise at all in caring for unaccompanied children. And so many years ago, over 10 years ago now, the US government simply gave this agency the authority to house, to detain these children. Now, the vast majority of people like Bethany are released to a close relative, an aunt, a grandparent, a mother or father, a brother or sister. 95% of all the children apprehended by Customs and Border Protection, by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, by Health and Human Services are released within about 2 months to a close relative. Some of you in the audience may even know situations like this, where a child may have traveled even with a visa, but at the airport, those questions were asked and they're worried and concerned about the child. Why are they traveling alone? Maybe they even have a visa to come to the United States, but when the child says why they're coming, they're saying, I'm coming to live and go to school with my aunt. That's not the purpose of a tourist visa. So the child may have come through an airport, come through a border, and then is released to this trusted adult. Well, in this situation, everyone thought it was going to be fine. Bethany did, her family back home did. Her aunt initially promised she would have good care, go to school, everything would be fine. But very rapidly, the situation changed. Bethany was told she could not leave the house. The doors of the house were locked when the aunt left the house every day. The aunt put her in charge of a toddler to take care of that toddler. She told Bethany she couldn't go to school. And she also had her working during the day, cooking meals that the aunt then took and prepared for and sold as a street vendor. Bethany got up at 4 in the morning and she often worked till very late at night. She received no wages. When she asked her aunt about that, she said, well, I'm supporting your family back home. I send money every month. So this is what you have to do to help me. Bethany probably would have remained in the shadows, trapped in her aunt's life and in her family context, except that because she had been apprehended by Customs and Border Protection, which sounds terrible, put in detention, put into deportation proceedings, but it was that fact of being put into deportation proceedings that meant we met her at the New York Immigration Court. Our project, Safe Passage Project, offers free assistance to any child who appears in that court. We were there the day Bethany arrived, and we matched her with a pro bono or free lawyer. That lawyer built a relationship of trust with Bethany, and the aunt didn't want to get in trouble with immigration either, so she was bringing Bethany to her hearings. Still, Bethany never told us about the situation. When her lawyer asked her, are you eating well? Are you going to school? Bethany lied and said everything's fine. One day, however, Bethany was very, very ill, and she begged her aunt to take her to the doctor, and her aunt would not do so. Bethany called her, took her aunt's cell phone, managed to take it into a bathroom, called her lawyer and said, please get me to the hospital. The lawyer came, took her to the hospital. Very sadly, it turned out Bethany had a rare form of stomach cancer. Because Bethany had to be admitted to the hospital and was now no longer in the care of her aunt, she told the truth about her situation. It took another 6 to 9 months of medical care, treatment, and finding a good placement for a safe place for Bethany to live with a foster family to convince Bethany to make an application as a victim of trafficking. It was so hard for her. She did not want the backlash in her family, to break the relationship between her aunt and her mother, their sisters, to break the heart of her grandmother, to traumatize further her family back home at the potential loss of all their income. One of the benefits of the T visa is that you can get a derivative benefit for your parent or siblings if you're a child. The happy end of the story is that trusted adult, the free lawyer, the person who built a relationship with Bethany, the social workers at the hospital, the Safe Passage Project team. Ultimately, Bethany was granted her visa. Her mother and brother were able to join her in the United States with green cards. Sadly, Bethany had missed treatment for so long, she died at age 24. What a story of both beauty and trauma. Let's go a little bit more deeply into the visa that helped Bethany and her family. It's called the T visa. You might think T stands for trafficking. It's actually a coincidence. Our statute has a lot of different kinds of visas. A visas for diplomats, G visas for people who work at NGOs, E visas for investors. But the letter T is the one that Congress adopted for victims of trafficking. And the statutory language is really intense and a little bit frightening. You'd think no one would qualify. It has to be severe trafficking. I'm not sure why Congress put the word severe there. And usually what the government does is say, what we're looking for is to show that the person who was the victim, adult or child, was enticed, forced, defrauded, coerced to come to the United States. It could be a sexual trafficking, engaging in sexual activity, or it could be forced labor. It could be a kind of, you have to pay off your debt because I paid for your trip. We call this sometimes modern day slavery. To apply for that T status, you actually have to be inside the United States. We can't help you apply for it from abroad. However, again, if you're a child, your parent and siblings under the age of 21 could be relocated with you later. And there is a requirement that you cooperate with law enforcement to bring the trafficker to justice. Now, notice that children who are under 18, Congress has said they are not forced to participate in a prosecution. I think that's wonderful that Congress recognizes that it's very difficult sometimes to be brave enough to come forward and bring a criminal prosecution. And in Bethany's case, I'm sad to say that the county authorities in Long Island, which is where Bethany was living, refused to prosecute the aunt. Nevertheless, Bethany was still protected by this statute. The trafficking victim, the person applying, has to also show that they would suffer harm. And again, Congress used the words extreme hardship. This is where advocacy is really important, with a lawyer helping you, usually having a psychological evaluation, a medical evaluation, an expert who can say why this experience will be with you the rest of your life. I want to admit here that this is a very difficult topic to talk about. It feels very judgmental at times, even when we use that very powerful label, trafficker. My own grandmother came to the United States in 1907 because my great-grandfather wanted her to be able to go to school and live in safety. My family is Jewish, and there were, at the time, racialized and religious attacks in Russia against Jewish children in particular. So my great-grandfather paid someone to pretend to be my grandmother's parents and to bring her to the United States. Just as Joyce told you just a few minutes ago, these documents didn't match up. The immigration authorities in 1907 let the two adults just enter the United States, but they kept my grandmother in detention at Ellis Island in New York. I did not know this story about my grandmother throughout her life. She never talked about it. It was only after she died at age 96, many years ago, that a cousin shared with me an oral recording that she had made, in which she told the story of these strangers pretending to be her parents and then abandoning her. She was going to be deported back to Europe, but her sister came forward and was able to promise the immigration authorities that she would care for my grandmother and would make sure she went to school. She signed an affidavit to that effect, and another relative posted a bond. But my great aunt had 4 children and needed help, and they were very poor. So my grandmother had to leave school at age 13. Throughout my life, my grandmother said, families who are surviving in the United States struggle. My family was not very wealthy, and people have to work and go to school, but she always encouraged me to stay in school. I'm very fortunate that I am who I am today because my grandmother made such a big sacrifice. Was my grandmother trafficked by her father and by those people who abandoned her and by her aunt who forced her to labor? Or was it simply what you have to do to survive? Well, the law does sometimes make us use these harsh labels, but I'm encouraging the audience to think of it as putting the child's interests first, which is a criteria in international law. And even though the United States is the only country in the world who has not signed the International Treaty on the Rights of the Child, our domestic law does protect children. So if you're aware of young people in the United States who are being forced to leave school, to work long hours, to not receive compensation, they may indeed have a remedy. In the United States, and it depends on the state you're living in, public school attendance is required. Some states allow children to have part-time schooling if they're working in agriculture. Some schools have programs to allow children to continue their schooling at night. But it is what we call our truant officers or our school officials who are on the lookout in our community for young people who should be in school and are not. Sadly, the United States domestic population has a very high dropout rate. And that dropout rate leaving high school is even higher for children of color. So it may not be uncommon in a city where you live, if you're in Atlanta or New York City or Los Angeles, to see teenagers working and maybe just assume that they don't want to be in school anymore. School's not offering them what they're looking for. But we need to look more closely because some of those children are not in school because they're under forced coercive situation to work to support their family abroad. Now I'm going to tell you a story of a young man from West Africa, and I'm not going to name the country, but he had a dream of being a football star. In the United States, we say soccer. I know in Liberia, this is a dream you all know. Your president made his successful world as being a world leader in soccer. I'm sure there's many young men living in Liberia today who hope one day they can too play professional football. Sadly, there are people who prey upon these dreams and hopes of talented athletes and young people by coming to rural areas and urban areas and promising them that if they'll come on a trip with the coaches and the talent scouts, they're going to bring them to the United States to possibly then get a college scholarship or to work in a professional setting in sports. The young man we met was in the streets of New York as a bicycle messenger. He worked in a bodega and he slept in the back of the store. But we didn't know any of this at first. The way we met him was on the soccer fields. One of our staff attorneys in Safe Passage Project was an avid footballer himself. And he saw this young man and he noticed he looked tired and hungry one day. And he asked him what's going on. And he said, well, I only come to these games when my boss lets me out. And I get paid $100 by the organizer of the game to come, play football with you. But the rest of the time I have to get right back to the store because if I don't do what he says, I'll never be able to pay back the debt. The family had put a mortgage on their farms to be able to pay for this trip for the young man to come to the United States to apply for that college scholarship. But it was all a charade, a fraud. Remember, the definition of trafficking is someone who's induced to come to the United States and then forced to work due to fraud. So this was not any kind of sexual activity, nor was Bethany's case. Both of these young men, Evan and Bethany, and these are imaginary names, they were forced under economic circumstances. Sometimes people are promised a good job in the United States. Economies are struggling, COVID's only make it worse. We heard that from prior speakers. And people know there's job shortages employment areas of shortage. There's hotels that are desperate for people to work. There's restaurants who can't staff themselves. The United States is experiencing a large unemployment level, but also people quitting jobs. Some unscrupulous people are trying to recruit people around the world to come and work in these industries. Sometimes it is forced sexual work. And if a young person under the age of 18, even if willingly engages in any sexual activity, that meets the definition of commercialized sexual trafficking. Of course, in the United States, in most of our jurisdictions, if you are arrested because you're engaging in commercialized sex work, our criminal system makes you the focus of a criminal prosecution. In many cities in the United States, however, now, our prosecutors are more progressive, more contextualizing, and they will work with that person they originally arrested on the streets or at a truck stop or in a brothel and try to help them with their immigration status. So in some cities, they actually provide free legal counsel to the people that are arrested who were engaged in sex work in an effort to break up commercialized vice, commercialized sex. Forced marriage is another area. You've heard about it earlier. And while in many cultures, families may be thinking they're doing well by their daughters, like giving them a husband who will support them, and this does happen across borders as well, a young person may be brought to the United States, perhaps with a fiancé visa, or even sponsored as a spouse, but that marriage is a violent one or an unhappy one psychologically. There are remedies for people, especially youth, but also adults who are forced into marriage. Well, we have a cap or quota on the number of these visas that can be issued every year. It's only 5,000 visas. And it's 10,000 for the U visa. I'm sorry, there's a typo in my slide. So 5,000 for the T visa, 10,000 for the U visa, which I'll talk about in a minute. Unfortunately, we have never reached that cap. We know there are thousands and thousands of people who are victims of trafficking, either labor or sexual work, and yet so few applications. I looked up the statistics just this morning. I have another slide for you later. This is saying that there's all kinds of waivers of other violations of immigration law if you're granted a T visa. This is an old chart, but it made a very good graph. The tall bar shows you we can go up to 5,000 visas, but the actual number of applications received as of 2017 was under half that. And the data from this year is that there were only 3,800 applications that were filed last year, and 1,000 of those were approved. So we're not even close to reaching that cap. But let's put this in context. Congress made a pretty low ceiling there, a cap, because every day, US Customs and Border Patrol inspects and admits at airports and land borders more than 1 million cars, vehicles, people in airplanes. So we have millions of people in the United States on temporary visas, on student visas, on working visas, and 11 million undocumented people. The fact that we're not reaching that cap is not because there aren't people being trafficked, but because we, the legal community, the community organizers, the people in the transit industry, we're not identifying these people. I'm going to talk really quickly about this parallel visa called the U visa. Again, doesn't mean anything. The letter U is just where it appears in the statutory code. It's for victims of crime. And when you first say that, people think, well, crime like rape or crime like assault, but forced servitude or being not paid the wages that you were promised. What's great about the U visa is the situation may have nothing to do with what happened at home. Maybe you came to visit relatives in the United States and you liked it here and you decided to stay and you overstayed your visa. About half the people or more in the United States who don't have papers came originally with a visa. And then they're offered a job, but they say, I know you don't have papers. I'm not going to pay you the minimum wage required by this local or federal law. That can be a basis of applying for a EU visa. And young people are particularly vulnerable here. An employer will say, well, you don't know anything, kid. You don't have any skills. So I'm going to start you out at $1 an hour, or you're only going to get tips. That violates our law. And in most states, the local Department of Labor or a human rights board will actually help that young person bring a wage and hour complaint, and then they can apply for a U visa. Well, sadly, the U visa is so oversubscribed that right now there's a backlog of 142,000 who've been approved for a green card based on this process, but they can only do 10,000 a year. The good news is, though, you can't be deported while you're waiting for that U visa application. Our government has a policy of ending any deportation proceeding. It may take time to get work permission. It may take time to ultimately get your permanent residence, but it is a path. But here's something I learned today that really made me sad. 91% of the applications for this visa are represented, of the people who are approved, are represented. That means that if you don't have a lawyer or a community organization behind you, it's very hard to get your case approved. And here are the top countries for the U visa: Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, India, and Ecuador. Where are the African countries in that list? While they may be a smaller portion of the percentage of immigrants living in the United States, we know that given the traditions of the professional people who engage in labor trafficking, we should have a higher rate of applications from Africa and a higher rate of people seeking these benefits. But if you can't find legal resources, if you don't have trusted partners in the community, you may not know this remedy exists. Now, this slide that I'm sharing, you can't read it, right? It's all these little boxes. What I'm saying is, wow, for children, there's a lot of other things that might lead to a path to status. There could be a family petition that could be filed, an asylum application. Let me give you an example of asylum. Some people coming from Africa, particularly women, but also could be a man wanting to protect a child, want to end the practice of female cutting or female circumcision. It is an illegal practice in many countries, including the United States, and it can be a basis for seeking protection as an asylum applicant in the United States. The T visa is there, the U visa, and we have an absolutely remarkable visa for unaccompanied children, where it's called a special immigrant juvenile status visa, where if a child has a guardian or a custodian who will go to family court and show that the parents have abandoned the child, perhaps like my great-grandfather did to the care of his oldest child to take care of his youngest, my aunt could have sponsored my grandmother and she would have had a path to a green card. For the African countries, there's no quota delay, there's no backlog for those people. And so if you know of African youth in the United States who have, maybe due to poverty, maybe due to broken families, maybe due to alcoholism or other problems, that child cannot go back to their family, they should be seeking special immigrant juvenile status. That's a lot of the work Safe Passage does. All right, let's go to my next slide. How can you help? I think you've already heard this throughout the workshop. It's really important that we build trust with the young people or the victims that we're trying to help. And sometimes it's not starting from a legal point of view, but being someone who talks to you on the soccer field, doesn't ignore you. When you go into the local corner store and you get your coffee and you see the child stocking goods, say good morning, get to know them. Many of the cases that I've worked on over the years were brought to me and to our legal organization by other American youth who befriended a child and then discovered they were forced to work in a Chinese restaurant or forced to be a bicycle messenger or not being paid wages, fair wages at a warehouse. But it's every level of society. We might only think about working class people, but it also occurs in other places like a family-owned business where they're developing real estate or engaged in high-level importation of goods. I have met people from Africa whose parents are quite wealthy and they wanted to force their daughter into marriage. She was able to use her contacts to get a sponsor to come on a business visa to the United States, and then found that that sponsor was going to want a kickback of her high-level wages. We were able to help her because she was being forced into marriage to file for asylum. So it's understanding and getting to know the person, maybe not calling them the victim. I know my slide says victim, but getting to build trust with that individual, whether you're a school official, a community organizer, a religious community friend, saying hello at the tea after church services or at the mosque where you go to celebrate a holiday, welcoming the stranger and building trust, and then trying to find a lawyer to help with that application. I borrowed a lot of these slides from the Coalition Against Slavery and Trafficking, which is an organization in California. And we can look for clues, like someone doesn't have any ID. Someone always says the same phrases in a kind of a memorized way about why they're here, that they don't mix and mingle with others, that they look like they're dirty or not well fed, that they look very tired in an inappropriate way. That they never have any pocket money. They don't have a cell phone, for example. In America, it's so ubiquitous. Someone not having a cell phone may be a sign someone's controlling them. And sexual trafficking can appear at a hotel, at a spa, at a truck stop, in the middle of an orange grove. In the labor industry, we've listed a lot of them. We know that about half of all the people who work in low-wage jobs are undocumented people who are exploited by the employers. Many of them would qualify for protection. I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute. I hope you'll jot down this number. We heard Laura say maybe in Liberia there needs to be a hotline to call. This is the national US hotline. Then it connects you with federal law enforcement. But think about how brave an immigrant has to be to call federal law enforcement. So it may be that we, people with papers, with status, are the ones who have to make that call. And we have to make sure we're working with law enforcement that is trained and sympathetic, empathetic to the needs of the person who doesn't have status or papers in the United States. So I'm going to say it in case some of you can't see the slide. 1-866-347-2423, or you can text help to the number 1-888, to the number 233-733. You can text help, and that should help you get connected with a hotline where they can also direct you to people who have grants for legal services. California, for example, authorized $30 million to help support free legal services to victims of modern slavery. Well, you've heard me say it again, we can't be bystanders. We have to be engaged. We have to build trust, and we have to build community awareness. The Biden administration is doing some good things in immigration. We know that in the last administration, there were still lots of applications approved and applications moved through the process, but huge backlogs have built up. And so it was with good news just this last month that the part of Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the benefits section, said that they're going to retrain their officers to have an empathetic victim approach, to be more cautious and careful, friendly and supportive as people apply and come out of the shadows. They're also doing a lot of training with law enforcement. I have been to some of those trainings where it's a little bit frightening because it's people that you're normally opposite in immigration court. You have immigration and customs enforcement lawyers asking you to build trust in your community. They're the same people that arrest people in the community. That's a problem in the US system. We probably need completely independent prosecutorial agencies who will build trust with the community. It's a flaw in our system that we ask people to come forward to the very agency that arrests their friends and relatives. Remarkable accomplishment for Liberians. I just had to share this in this conference. In 2019, Congress passed a statute called the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness. Now, you don't have to be a refugee to qualify for a green card through this path. It's estimated that about 10,000 Liberians living in the United States of our population of 150,000 to 300,000, nobody knows exactly, would qualify for benefits under this statute. It's a very special kind of statute. You simply, it's forms and paperwork and filing fees, but you come forward, you go to the USCIS, you prove your Liberian nationality, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. You show that you've been in the United States since 2014, and you can apply for a green card. And if granted, they're going to retroactively assume that you should have had that green card years before, and you will be immediately eligible to apply for citizenship. That's remarkable because normally you have to wait 5 years after you get your green card to apply for citizenship. And having US citizenship means you can sponsor your parents for immigration if you're over 21, your brothers and sisters, although it can take 14 to 20 years, it's a long queue, or your own adult children, married or unmarried, for status in the United States. Well, we were very optimistic when Congress passed this remarkable statute that people would come out of hiding and come forward and apply. So in March of 2021, the Congressional Research Service reported that only 3,248 applications have been made so far. 666 were approved, 111 were denied, and most are still pending, over 2,500. Just giving you some idea of where these applications came from in America. 322 came from Maryland, 576 in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, the whole state, 496 in Minnesota, 258 in New Jersey, 216 in New York. And I know we have a lot of people from Atlanta on this webinar, only 185 from Georgia. Why are people not coming forward? Based on my experience in immigration law, I would say there's probably 3 reasons. One, people may have had an encounter with the police during their life in the United States. Maybe they were arrested for driving under the influence. They were arrested for driving without a license. They were involved in some minor crime or maybe domestic violence. Yes, having been involved with any kind of criminal activity in the United States means you need a special evaluation of whether you should apply, because this application can be denied and you could be put into deportation proceedings based on criminal activity in the past. Any kind of controlled substance conviction, including marijuana possession, could be a barrier. Although marijuana is now legal in many states, for immigrants to the United States, it is still a basis of inadmissibility or potential denial of benefits. I think there's another reason that Liberians are not coming forward to the degree we expected, and that is honestly systemic racism. I've been in immigration law since 1984, and throughout my life, I've seen that Haitians are not trusted. People from West Africa or East Africa are assumed to be lying, whereas the same scenario and conversation from someone from Cuba or someone from Poland or someone from Ireland is accepted. And so let us acknowledge that racism exists either as an unknowing implicit bias or as a real bias in our law enforcement. And so I urge you in the Liberian community and beyond to seek legal help. An organization called Undocu Black has a network of free legal providers, and I have these resources for you in the slides. These are the government slides. I'm going to give my slides to the conveners to make available to give back to you so you can find all these resources. But nonprofits like the Coalition Against Slavery and Trafficking Los Angeles, World Without Exploitation at the bottom, my own Safe Passage Project, there's free resources there. You can find more information at undocublack.org about the Liberian Act. Here's the important point. The deadline is this December. We've got a little over a month and a half to have Liberians come out of the shadows and seek this benefit. And I want to mention another great thing about it. If you have family members still in Liberia, they will be able to have following to join, remedy benefits to join you in the United States. Maybe you've been separated for 20 years and you'll be able to finally reunite with your family in a rapid way. That would be your spouse or minor children. Or if they're in the United States with you but undocumented, they'll be able to qualify as long as one person, that parent or spouse, has been in the United States the requisite period of time. It's really a remarkable statute, and I hope people will take advantage of it. So stop sharing my slides and come back to full screen. I hope I've left sufficient time for questions, and I really entertain any that you would like to go further into. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Lenny. That was an incredible presentation. We can definitely file under news you can use, as well as the general sort of theoretical issues. I mean, you raised so many important points and you shared so many sort of heart-wrenching stories, but there are things that many of us who work in these areas see every day. We know people who are in these situations, and we're here at this workshop because we want to help in ways large and small. So I really, really appreciate that. One of the things that I wanted to ask, because it's so clear that you work with so many organizations where people in your legal profession have come together to kind of pull your power and influence together to help others. What advice would you have for people in different professions who are thinking, how can I get more people together to increase the power of my work? Can you speak to that question at all?
Absolutely. I mean, what we're doing right now, where we're raising awareness and educating people about resources they may not even know, is so important. In public schools and parent-teacher association meetings, there are people who are hungry for information. I get a lot of phone calls from principals at high schools or even middle schools who are saying, I'm really worried about Bethany, or Evan stopped coming to class, and we think he's from Liberia, or we think he's from Guatemala. Is there any way you can reach out? Sometimes physicians, nurses, hospitals also see people, because in the United States, healthcare is not free. Many immigrants wait until there's a dire situation to go to the hospital, like Bethany's case, and making sure our social workers and medical personnel are cross-trained. Every year I do volunteer lectures in social work schools. Maybe we could even design, as many of these organizations have, online curricula that is free. If you go to the Coalition Against Slavery and Trafficking, and I had that link in there, CASTLA.org, I think it is, it's based on Los Angeles. They have free on-demand trainings that people can get involved with. But we need everyone. You know, merchants associations in the United States who are trying to establish those practices. New York City, for example, just passed an ordinance that said you have to pay minimum wage. You can't just tell a bicycle rider you're going to live on tips. There's going to be education about that for the merchants. Merchants sometimes say, I can't compete if there's a bad merchant using exploited labor. Banding collective businesses together to create a floor, a ceiling of compliance is really important. I hope that's responsive, but we need college students, we need professors, we need social workers, we need medical professionals, and we need just the ordinary person who goes to the bodega to get a coffee every morning.
Right, that's so true. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to record this program, so that it could be a resource, and so that, for example, people could hear your lecture over and over in different settings and draw down from those resources. I'm curious if you went to Liberia, and I don't know if you've ever been there, and you had an opportunity to speak with your fellow lawyers in the country, or if you had an opportunity to speak with members of judicial systems or criminal justice systems, what kind of questions would you ask to open up a conversation about strengthening those systems in Liberia to address and counter trafficking?
Well, first of all, I would be so honored to ever go to Liberia. I have not been able to go there. I found that my work as an immigration lawyer, I thought I would get to travel the world, but mostly I work from the United States. Our country is so filled with people in need here that I rationalize my staying here. But the first thing I would encourage other governments of the world, including Liberia, to do is please don't maybe focus with the angle of only law enforcement can solve the problem, and also to create trusted places and fund them adequately, such as safe houses. You know, the nonprofits in the United States sometimes are the ones who have to build shelters and housing. Homelessness and fear of you have to stay with the people who are abusing you is one of the reasons people don't come forward. So if Liberian government can create organizations of trust and then have that organization be the conduit link to law enforcement, so that the person who's first coming forward, first being brave, gets food, security, counseling, safety before they're a witness in a trial or a prosecution. I think that's really important to successful work. And then I'd say, please don't put caps on your numbers of people who can benefit. That's so artificial. And it ends up that it takes a lot of the time of the lawyers in the organizations just managing the status of old cases that are going to take years to complete. They can't take on new cases simply because there's these artificial limits. It's very much about politics. The US doesn't want to incentivize fraud in the system. Let's not worry so much about the fraud. We know trafficking and victimization from forced labor is on the rise. Let's try to change the culture there before we worry about the immigration numbers.
Those are very helpful questions. And we also got one question from the audience that says, suppose that volunteers are interested in mitigating the risks of human trafficking. Are there recommended programs, courses, or links to help them pursue the required know-how? Obviously, you've offered a lot, but would you like to say anything more to this person's question about how, I'm Jane, volunteer, I want to get involved. What can I do?
Well, most of the organizations, again, if you start using our friend Google and just searching yourself in your community for who's doing this work, particularly in the United States, usually on a website of an organization, it will say, get involved, or we need volunteers. Language skills, cultural competency skills, even offering yourself as a community expert just to say, could I do a training for your lawyers to understand language, questions, how to be culturally competent? It's actually something lawyers now are required to learn to do, I'm very glad to say, because sometimes we are so filled with legal jargon that we talk down to people or we re-victimize them really by the language we're using. So I think just being your own self and coming forward and offering that, maybe with just have a coffee, sit around a table and have a conversation, be very good. And again, most lawyers in this work try not to be judgmental. We're not blaming Bethany's aunt completely, but Bethany didn't have to stay in that situation of forced labor. The other thing I would say is if you are in the United States, you don't have to go to law school. But boy, would I love more people of color to come to law school, more people first generation, more people with immigrants. And many law schools will accept people to attend law school, even if you're undocumented. Now, in the United States, you do have to complete your bachelor's degree before you can have a law degree. But we also have a program where you can train to appear before U.S. Immigration Service or appear in immigration court, even if you're not a lawyer. And that's called becoming an accredited representative. It usually requires 40 hours of specialized training, and there are many programs now. Both Catholic Legal Immigration Network offers it, you don't have to be Catholic, and other people offer this where you can train and then you can work in a nonprofit under the supervision of a lawyer, greatly expanding their cultural competence, their expertise, and you'll be doing that work side by side with social workers and lawyers in that organization, providing low cost or free legal services. So I would love to, out of this program, to see a whole bunch of emails to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I really don't mind. And it may take me a few days to get back to you. Please forgive me. A death in my family. And so I'm going to be spending the next few days focusing on my family, but I will get back to you. And if I can, I'll direct you to where you might learn more. More questions?
Yeah, thank you, Lenny. That's extremely helpful. And I love some of these very specific suggestions you're making. For example, I'm sure that a lot of people don't know about this idea of an accredited representative, and imagine how powerful it would be for someone to be both a cultural expert or a language expert and an accredited representative. That would add so much benefit to the system, because I think there are a lot of people who don't step forward because they don't know how to connect through a language channel, or they worry that someone who doesn't understand their culture will judge them wrongly, or will take things out of context, because it does happen. I mean, it's all part of that whole racism in the legal and justice system that I'm really glad you identified. I mean, I think that our own sort of non-statistical review of what we see around us sees how Haitians and Africans are treated in not only in legal systems, but in medical systems and, you know, so many other arenas. So there are a lot of ways that we want to deal with that. I'm looking at a few other questions that are coming from. One person says, who benefits from your program? Are these services paid for by survivors or others who want to benefit from the service? I think there's that question about, you know, sometimes people don't step forward because they think something costs something and they'll have to pay money that they don't have to get where they're trying to go. Can you address that?
Most of the nonprofits in New York and most of them in major cities, they don't charge anything at all. Now, the government does sometimes have filing fees. For example, that Liberian statute that I talked about, there is a filing fee there. For the U visa, the T visa, the special immigrant juvenile status, there's no fee. And there's also formal visa waivers of fees. If you go to get help and someone says, oh yes, I will apply for this U visa for you, but I charge $5,000. That might be what a private lawyer is charging. And you're saying $5,000, that's so much money. It is and it isn't, because it may be many, many years of work. And most immigration lawyers charge what we call a flat fee. So something I really encourage people to do is make sure you know who's helping you. Does that organization have a public website where you can look them up and make sure they're a bona fide nonprofit organization? In the Bronx, for example, in New York, we had a bona fide nonprofit organization, but they were charging people $40,000 and basically making them sign a contract of servitude. And it took 10 years to get U.S. Immigration Service to revoke their accredited status. But in New York, at least, and in other cities, you can go to a consumer fraud person and you will get your money back and you will get protected. Nonprofits generally do not charge for their legal services, but that means there's a long wait list. So sometimes going to your state bar association, they have pro bono, or pro bono in Latin means for the public good. It means free legal services. And again, progressive cities like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, some parts of Chicago, I'm not sure about Atlanta, they actually have some city council money that they're authorizing to be spent on behalf of immigrants. For those of you who might have the ability, fundraising to help a local nonprofit could be very valuable. And you may think, well, I don't have a lot of money myself, I couldn't do it. But even let's say you have a pancake breakfast and you raise a few $1,000s, you can then donate that perhaps to add social work support money. So for example, at Safe Passage Project, I started this project just as my own free time. Then my law school dean gave me a $15,000 stipend I could use to have a part-time lawyer helping me. And then he gave me $30,000. That's not a lot of money, but I was able to get people to donate 10 hours a week to do something like that. Today, Safe Passage has grown and it receives funding from the state of New York, from the city of New York, but the majority of funding is from individuals. So find your local community organization and see if you can help. And you can also say, I would like my money to go to help the victim have housing, food, transportation. And that is something that's really important.
That's a great point. I appreciate that. And actually, you're making me think about one organization that I work with, which is the Tahiri Justice Center in Washington, D.C. I'm newly on their board. And they also provide pro bono legal services for women who are refugees, immigrants, et cetera, particularly when they're experiencing domestic violence or other kinds of things. Trafficking could fall in that category. So it's important for people to know about and get the word out about these NGOs and nonprofits that offer the pro bono legal services, and people can often get what they need without having to worry about where they're going to come up with that money. Someone has asked an important question that I know is on a lot of people's minds. This is someone who's at the Carter Center group in Liberia, and they said, can the applicant of the T or U visa make application without risking the arrest of their family members?
So I want to say yes, because the branch of the government that adjudicates that T or U visa is not the enforcement branch, it's the benefits branch. But they do a background check and they look for that criminal activity. So if anyone's ever had an encounter with police, even a bench ticket, maybe for drinking in the park or smoking a joint on the steps, you do need a lawyer to help you navigate that. Now, when that person then makes that application, they're going to disclose their address, they're going to disclose their household.
Mhm.
In my experience, that does not lead to ICE coming to the home.
Mhm.
However, the organization that you're working with, hopefully the lawyers that you're working with, will educate you about what your rights are.
Mhm.
ICE cannot enter your home without a warrant. They sometimes pretend they have a warrant. They say, oh, we've got a warrant here. And you say, slip it under the door. So there's a lot of free programs. They use these pieces of paper that they write warrant on it, but it's not a judicial warrant. You don't have to answer questions when you're stopped on the street or you're stopped at a bus station. You can say, I have a right to ask for a lawyer. I do not want to answer your questions. Now that may mean you're taken into custody, but you don't have to volunteer information about yourself. Under the Biden administration, they have reversed things that the Trump administration put into play. There are 1.4 million people already in deportation proceedings, some of whom want to be there because they're actually seeking asylum or benefits before the court. But because of that huge volume of work, the Biden administration has told the prosecutors to prioritize the cases. And so if your family member is an overstay or entered the country unlawfully, but isn't a serious criminal background, they are not a priority to be placed into removal, to be placed into enforcement. So you can never promise 100%. I've been in this field a super long time. I have not seen people who applied for UOT status have their family members arrested.
Mhm.
Unless, of course, the family member is the trafficker. So that is why so many people don't choose to apply. So Bethany, for example, she could have done special immigrant juvenile status, or she could have done the T. The
Mhm.
reason she chose the T was so that her mother and brother could join her.
That makes sense. So I just learned that Joari Hendricks, who was the presenter for Brussels Airlines, would like to ask you a question. Maybe he can be brought on camera to ask his question. And this will be the last question that we'll have in this session.
Okay, I will not take too much of your time, but thank you indeed for this wonderful presentation. What strikes me and what I think was very important also in your message in the fight against human trafficking was actually the fact how we're dealing with it on different levels. So you've been explaining that getting acquainted with someone, getting someone's confidence is so important in getting to know their story. And that is exactly what we need to do on a slightly other level at the airport itself. And that's what I meant with started to talk with simple conversations and things like that. So it is so important to take the best practices which you have in really the bigger picture, let's say it like that, to bring that down to the people here around the table who are mostly involved in aviation and the airport and so on, that we can take these lessons to us and that we can try and put it in another smaller perspective, but as useful as the work which you are doing. Also teaching people the types of visas for the US, for example, they're so extended that each visa has, I always say, has a story behind it.
Yes.
There's a reason why you have a certain visa, and that helps also people in looking at how should we approach a person? What is the story behind it? And is the story relating to the kind of visa that these people are carrying with them? And that's also an important message I think that you've been bringing. So sorry, this is not a real question, but more a confirmation of what you were saying. But I find it really important to point it out in what you've been teaching us.
Yeah, so I would just say to the airline industry and the transportation industry, the more you can educate yourselves, and it's constantly changing about the requirements of the visa category, the more you could just maybe have a friendly conversation. So if you're looking at those passports and visa stamps and you see it's a B2, that's a tourist visa, and you say, so what are you going to do? Just in a cheerful way, not in a border officer way. And they say, oh, I can't wait to go to Disneyland. Right? As you were saying in your example, I've heard Disneyland so many times. I think the Walt Disney Company should fund all our work, since they've become such a lure. And you just know that that's not adding up. You can try to figure that out. And another example is you may ask the child may have a student visa in their passport. And you say, well, where are you going to go to school? And they say, I'm not going to go to school, I'm going to work. And so it's these inconsistencies with the way someone's dressed or what they say they're doing. Also, if they're afraid to answer your question. Yeah, it's really, I just don't know how you do it in such a short time frame. I just want to make one more point on this. In my experience, it takes months before a young person will reveal the entire context of what has happened. They can't tell you in a 20-minute interview at the airport or at a Customs and Border Protection arrest. That's why our systems need to have built-in legal representation, social work support, psychological support to allow the young person or the victim, adult, to have a platform of safety and trust before they really give us the whole story.
Well, that's so true, Lenny. And that's really an African concept, the essence of this whole idea that it takes a village to solve this problem, and that we are all talking about different ways how we can participate in that village. So on that note, I want to thank you for a really full session, so chock full of information, so helpful. You've been a lovely presenter. And I want to turn it back over to Honorable Cynthia Blandford to open up our closing session today.
Thank you very much, Layli, for the opportunity to bring some closing remarks. But before I do that, there's a very special person. I hope Ambassador Patton has joined us. I see that he is signed in. Ambassador, can you unmute? Ambassador Patton? I just spoke with him. Can you unmute your button? Oh, Ambassador, there you are. Good afternoon, Ambassador. We can't hear you, but we see you've taken your button off of mute, but we can't hear you. Eric, can you check his button just to be sure it's not anything on our end?
Yeah, he's unmuted.
Ambassador? Ambassador Patton? Oh dear. We just spoke to him and we did some troubleshooting, so I'm not quite sure why we can't hear him. I'll probably have to call him on offline and see if there's any small technical issue. But Eric, Ambassador? He's calling me. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Ambassador, we can't hear you. So he is trying his best to join us. He does hear us, but for some reason we can't hear him. So what I think I'm going to do, and hopefully we can get him on shortly, I'm going to go ahead and at least make an introduction, if that's okay.
Might he also try logging out and logging back in? Sometimes that helps.
Ambassador, if you can log out and log back in. He's trying to do that now. So apologies to our participants and speakers. We're having a little bit of a technical issue here. I wonder if Eric can help him as well, but I'm not sure. So I'm wondering, Layli, yeah, he's still troubleshooting.
Yeah, let's just give it a minute. I think everybody understands in some of these international workshops that people have different, kind of bandwidths that they're working from in their national context. So let's just give it a second, and then I'm sure that you'll want to share his introduction. So it shouldn't take him too long, assuming he's in a reasonably good Wi-Fi area in Liberia.
Well, we can, no, we can't, we still can't hear you. And in fact, let me see. No, I can't. We can't hear you, nor can we see you.
It's possible also that in worst case, he could share his remarks over the phone and your phone could be put to the speaker. That's
Yeah,
obviously
what we
less
can do, Mr.
desirable.
Ambassador, I can put my phone to the screen and we can hear from you. Because I hear the background, we hear that it's in progress, but for some reason we can't hear you. Mr. Ambassador, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. Can I hear your voice? I'm going to introduce you and I'm going to put the phone to the computer so people can hear your remarks. Would that be okay? Well, that's okay. We're going to allow you to make remarks once I introduce you by phone.
Hey, Cynthia.
So stay on the line.
Cynthia, this is Eric.
Yes.
Maybe, does he know if he connected using his laptop audio or phone audio?
Are you connected on your laptop? Laptop. The computer at the office, and your audio is on the laptop? Okay. Okay. All right. So
I'm gonna try to manually unmute him and we'll see what happens.
okay, good. He's gonna try to manually unmute you, Ambassador. So hold on for us. Thank you, sir. So I'm wondering, any luck?
No, it's not allowing me to do it.
Okay. All right. So Ambassador, I'm going to go ahead and make the introduction and then I'm going to have you go ahead and make your remarks if that's okay. You're so welcome. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and understanding. Ambassador George S.W. Patton Sr. is a career diplomat with more than 2 decades of experience in the Liberian Foreign Service. He served in various capacities at the Liberian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and rose to the ranks of the Liberian Foreign Service. Prior to his appointment as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Liberia to the United States of America, Ambassador Patton served as a Liberian ambassador to Ethiopia, Kenya, and permanent representative to the African Union and to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He previously served as Minister Counselor in charge of political and legal affairs at the Permanent Mission of Liberia to the United Nations. His functions included coverage of the United Nations Security Council, the African Union Observer Mission to the United Nations, expert in the 4th and 6th committees of the UNGA, peace-building expert and focal point for the Liberia country-specific configuration on the agenda of the Peace-Building Commission, PBC, to name a few. Ambassador Patton has other diplomatic assignments, or he had other diplomatic assignments in West, North, and East Africa as counselor and first secretary, respectively. Ambassador Patton has a master's degree in international relations from the University of Liberia, where I also attended, a bachelor's degree in laws from the St. Mary's University College in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Liberia. His Excellency has certificates in diplomacy, public international law, and conflict management and resolution. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome by phone His Excellency Ambassador George S.W. Patton Sr. to bring remarks. Ambassador, I'm bringing you up to the computer now. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. It's unfortunate my face cannot come on this thing, but I am glad to be here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I would like to begin my own presentation by extending profound thanks and appreciation to Honorable Senator Blanford for organizing this very important workshop on human trafficking and for bringing together a distinguished group of speakers who are well experienced and versed on the issues of human trafficking. Human trafficking continues to be a challenge, not only in Liberia, but in many countries across the world. In its 2018 report, the UN highlighted that 50,000 individuals were found to have been trafficked across 148 countries,
While we are aware that human trafficking can happen in every community, and victims can be of any nationality, race, and gender, other factors such as poverty, displacement, cultural practices, and unemployment increase a person's likelihood of victimization. Trafficked persons are often subjected to extreme psychological and physical abuse at the hands of traffickers, resulting in potential life-threatening health issues, physical injuries, mental trauma, ostracism, social rejection, etc. In recent years, Liberia has been identified as a country of origin, transit, and destination for internal and internal human trafficking. Human trafficking exists in the country partly due to cultural or traditional practices, but other factors such as the civil war, youth unemployment, orphanage accreditation, and adoption issues, illicit mining, etc., have all contributed to the current human trafficking debacle in Liberia. There are reports that the internal trafficking is the more prevalent in Liberia than international trafficking. The reports indicate that women, girls, and children are often trafficked from rural towns and villages to urban areas for domestic services, sexual exploitation, street vending, and other forms of exploitation. As part of efforts to prevent human trafficking, Liberia enacted a critical piece of legislation in 2005 called the Act to Ban Trafficking in Persons within the Republic of Liberia. The law prohibits all forms of internal and international human trafficking, including labor and sex trafficking, and prescribes relevant penalties. The law demands transportation companies to verify that every traveler possesses the necessary travel documents, including passports and visas, to enter a designated country and any transit country. It outlines the responsibilities of commercial transportation companies in the fight against human trafficking and proposes consequences for failure to comply with the specified requirements. Ladies and gentlemen, also in 2005, the Women and Children Protection Section was established at the Liberian National Police to provide protection for women and children and to investigate cases of human trafficking. A national anti-human trafficking task force was established and is headed by the Ministry of Labor. It cuts across the government agencies and institutions and comprises the media and civil society. In 2019, the Liberian government launched its second 5-year national action plan to combat trafficking in persons in Liberia. The plan was one of several actions taken by the government to deal with the risks and perils imposed by transnational criminal networks using Liberia as both a transit and destination points. While the law remained in force, a critical component of the prosecution of traffickers has, over the years, been a challenge and a rallying concern among many stakeholders in Liberia's drive to curb the menace. And so, after broad consultations, the government of Liberia this year amended the anti-human trafficking law to give it more teeth to bite. The focus of the amendment was its ability to prosecute offenders and provide protection for witnesses. It also has a stringent imprisonment requirement if offenders are found guilty. Lack of prosecution of offenders engaged in trafficking has been a major concern by the U.S. government and other stakeholders. Support of the U.S. Embassy, the International Development Law Organization, and other stakeholders was crucial in achieving this milestone of amending the law and giving it more obligations and more possibilities to prosecute individuals allegedly engaged in trafficking in persons. The law has been printed and published. The government of Liberia is providing funding and is engaging civil society groups and the national media to undertake wider public awareness of the new law. The government has initiated investigation into allegations of trafficking, identified new shelter for victims, and is collaborating with foreign governments in tracking offenders. There are about 6 trafficking cases personally before the courts in Liberia. As an indication of the government's seriousness to prosecute, a group of lawyers has been hired by the government to prosecute these cases. In conclusion, I wish to commend Honorable Consul Blanford again for keeping the focus on this important subject. I wish to thank all participants and panelists for the important perspectives they have brought to this discussion. The Liberian government understands the magnitude of human trafficking and will continue to work with partners and take proactive steps to save its citizens and foreign nationals residing in the country against trafficking. The continued support of partners is essential in providing training for security personnel working around the clock at both entry and exit points to be able to identify incidents of human trafficking. Training for members of the press may also be necessary in gathering information on this threat. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for those incredible remarks on behalf of the Liberian Embassy in Washington, D.C. We wish we could see you in person. We understand the technical difficulties, but again, we look forward to working with you. On behalf of our partnership team here, our grantor and our grantees, we expect that you will be certainly a part of our expanded team. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting ready to conclude our program. And again, I apologize that we weren't able to see the ambassador in person on this. As we conclude today, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, stakeholders, civil society present, ladies and gentlemen, please let me say a heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to be a part of this very important workshop on how to identify, report, and help mitigate human trafficking in Liberia. A special thanks and appreciation to our grant partners, Wellesley Center for Women, under the leadership of Dr. Layli Mempayan, Executive Director. Thank you for your outstanding leadership and your support. The Liberian Airport Authority, SM Brussels, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the University of Liberia. We appreciate all the good work, and of course, the University Consortium for Liberia as well. I'm hopeful that with the additional training and advocacy that has been brought forward in our discussions today, Liberia will become a leader in helping to combat human trafficking and lead the way forward in this space. We look forward to working with LAA, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Wellesley Center for Women, the University Consortium for Liberia, and SM Brussels to convene a workshop on human trafficking in Liberia in 2022. A special thanks again to the U.S. Embassy in Liberia for allowing this opportunity to convene these meetings and for your funding support. Finally, I might mention to you on behalf of a joint mission that we are planning between Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas. We will have a trade mission, an education mission to Liberia, April 19th to the 29th, 2022, All workshop participants will receive this invitation flyer, and we welcome you to join us, where I will co-host the event along with City Councilwoman Carolyn Shabazz, District D in Houston, Texas. We will be your co-hosts. Again, on behalf of the University Consortium for Liberia Board of Directors and the Liberian Consulate in Atlanta, Georgia, you are most welcome. I will turn it over to Layli. Thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this important endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Blanford. And I want to add my thanks to all of the high level and expert participants, as well as all of the attendees from the different transportation, travel, and tourism sectors, as well as other people who joined for a variety of reasons, in part because we hope that you'll be future partners in this work. So I just want to thank everyone on behalf of the University Consortium for Liberia and again, the Wellesley Centers for Women for attending Trapped in Transit, a human trafficking awareness workshop for the transportation, travel, and tourism sector in Liberia. And especially again, I'd like to thank the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia for funding this workshop. I now want to offer what I think we could call a closing charge to everyone who attended or participated. Our biggest goal was for all attendees to learn what trafficking is, how to recognize it, how to spot the signs, as well as to learn strategies to know what to do when they spot it. We now know many signs of trafficking thanks to our many expert guests and high-level presenters, whether sex trafficking, labor trafficking, child trafficking, or other kinds of trafficking. We know that it happens inside and between countries. We know that sometimes people know when they're being trafficked and sometimes they don't. We know that trafficking is a violation of human rights and that we're empowered to do something about it. We've learned how to work together with members of our respective professions, and importantly, how to collaborate and partner with people from other professions and industries to power up our efforts. We know that it takes a village to address trafficking, and we want to be part of that village. We know that culture is part of the equation. We're committed to doing more from this point forward to address trafficking. If we see something, we will say something, and we know how to do so without further endangering those that we suspect are being trafficked. So the closing charge is this. First, learn to recognize the signs of trafficking wherever you work. Get site-specific and take charge of improving the recognition of trafficking at your workplace. Second, network, collaborate, and partner with others inside and outside your industry, your sector, your company, or your organization to power up your work and your impact. For starters, you are now connected with everyone who attended this workshop, and you can certainly continue that networking through this collaboration between the University Consortium for Liberia and the Wellesley Centers for Women. You can reach out to Honorable Blanford or to myself if you'd like to continue with this work. Third, remember the local global connection. Trafficking starts and ends in the local context, but it is a global phenomenon, and we will need to address global factors like poverty, unemployment, lack of education, and importantly, gender inequality to really eradicate trafficking. So we all have to do two things at once. We have to work in our local context, but we also have to work on global issues. As Honorable Blanford mentioned, our collaboration will be producing a second workshop in Liberia in the first half of 2022, and our focus will be on market women and all of the ways that they can learn to recognize and stop trafficking in that context. We'll be collaborating closely with the University of Liberia and its new gender studies program, and we hope that many of you here today will be able to join us in this work. Honorable Blanford and myself will be coming to Liberia in a few weeks. It'll be an opportunity to have additional conversations, to continue with the research on local conditions and context, and an opportunity to form partnerships to do this important work moving forward. We can all make a difference. Thank you so much for sharing these last 2 days with us.
Thank you very much. We are wishing you all a wonderful and blessed rest of the day. And thank you so much again for the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia for your support of this important work. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful day and a great weekend. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Thank you all. That concludes the program.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.